Chapter 716. However, with Wu Ying's ability and talent, it would not be a problem for him to groom half of the empire of Yutong if he were to start a class and take in disciples. The pamphlets that were in front of him were more than enough to prove it. How many people do you need specifically? Lung Daoyin asked. Wu Ying calculated in his mind and said, there can be 20 people for me to choose from, but no more than 10 can stay. In the end, however, I can only choose one person each for my legacy, one for civil and one for martial. That's a little too few, Taizheng said. Wu Ying rolled his eyes. Everyone understood what he meant. This was teaching from the very beginning. Who knew how much effort it would take? 10 people was already a little too many. How could it be considered too few? However, Wu Ying continued. Other than the 2 I've chosen in the end, even the other 8 who have been eliminated from my side shouldn't be a problem for them to guard one side, conservatively speaking. The quintet's eyes shone. What are the specific requirements? Old Mistress Shengguan was more meticulous in her thinking. The 2 I value the most need to have a family background. Wu Ying said. Otherwise, it'll take too long for them to climb up from the bottom. No one had any objections to this. It was a reasonable request to have a high starting point. As for the other 8, I have no other requirements other than their character. Wu Ying said. That makes things easier. Qiu Jianhan was the first to voice his opinion. The few of us will help you be the head examiners. You don't have to worry about fairness. The others nodded in agreement. Then, I'll have to trouble all of you to help me. Wu Ying bowed faintly and said. I know that all of you elders are busy with official duties, and even more personal matters. I dare not stay for long. Please leave now. Once he said that, the quintet looked at each other, not knowing how to react. F***CK, you invited us here one by one just to give us a mission? You've sent us an invitation, brother. Forget about wine and meat. We can't even get a glass of water when we come here, and you're chasing us away. How could there be such a thing in this world? Even if you have talent, great talent, and are amazing. Yes, you are amazing. Fang Qingtian did not know whether to laugh or cry. Wu Ying, aren't you going to take care of a meal? Wu Ying lifted his head to look at the old Grand Commandant coldly, and said flatly, your humble servant has always been poor. Now, I don't even have a penny on me. All these years, we've been living off the government, and wearing the government's clothes. We've taken too many advantages. How can we be greedy? The implication was, you want me to treat you to a meal? That's forcing me to be greedy, forcing me to fall. What do you mean? The 5 of them were once again dumbfounded and speechless for a long time. I'm convinced. Qiu Jianhan said angrily. This rascal, he really lives up to his name of Wu. The moment he said that, everyone was instantly reminded of the iron-faced Good Samaritan. They could not help glancing suspiciously at Wu Ying's face, thinking to themselves, F***CK. Don't tell me these 2 are twins? They were the 2 oddities of Yutong's officialdom. You and Wu Lai, Lung Daoyin finally asked, are brothers. Wu Ying watched Lung Daoyin's face quietly for a while before he suddenly asked, are all those with the surname Lung in this world your brothers? Lung Daoyin was exasperated. All of them are my brothers? What kind of nonsense was that? Lung was not a big star, but there were millions of people in this world. Who could give birth to so many people? This bastard could really choke people to death with his words. Ha ha ha. Qiu Jianhan was overjoyed. Wu Ying kept a straight face, his expression unfriendly. You may leave. I have something to attend to. The 5 of them were instantly enraged. Even His Majesty could not speak to the 5 of them like this. It was the first time in their lives that they were asked to leave like this. The 5 of them stood up angrily and left, cursing and swearing. Fang Qingtian walked to the door and suddenly turned to ask, that's not right. Your food and clothing are provided by the country. Where is your salary for so many years? Old Grand Commandant Fang's question came out of the blue, but there was a deeper meaning behind it. Yutong rewarded its soldiers handsomely with rations and salaries. Wu Ying's position was extremely high, and he was not burdened by his family. His family should be rich, so why did he not have a single penny? Wu Ying replied, it's always been kept in the Board of War's account. This lowly official has never used money, so there's no need to withdraw it. I even have to spend it, it's troublesome. Old Grand Commandant Feng's mouth was agape, looking at this ghost-like fellow like he was looking at a deity. After a long time, he closed his mouth with a click and left without a word. There was only one word in his mind: amazing. There was actually someone in this world who did not take a salary, just because he was afraid that it would be too troublesome to spend money. The 5 bosses, who refused to believe it, went to the financial department of the military supplies department and retrieved Wu Ying's salary records. They found out that Wu Ying's salary was indeed not a small sum. He had already accumulated more than 100,000 taels of silver. However, there was no record of him claiming it at all. He was truly a rich man. Qiu Jianhan shook his head and sighed. I thought he was a god who could rule the world, but he's actually a ghost who has gone into seclusion. He probably won't be able to spend our human money in this lifetime. This old man should quickly go work for him. I'll go as well. It's more important to go work quickly. The group turned and walked away, filled with admiration. Cough, I say. I guess Sir Wu won't want the money he's saved in the future. Tai Jing's eyes glowed. Why don't you give it all to me? Take it. Old Grand Commandant decided right away. Of course, Tai Jing was not going to spend it for himself. Wu Ying would not use the money anyway, so he might as well let Tai Jing take it. The families of the martyrs could at least have a few more mouthfuls of food to eat. It was better than leaving them here to collect dust. If it were not for today's meeting, even if Tai Jing and the other bosses knew that Wu Ying had such a sum of silver taels under his name, and knew that he would not use it, they would not have done so either. Now, however, the situation was completely different. Wu Ying was even willing to give away such a precious book that contained his lifetime's worth of knowledge. What was a little bit of silver worth? How could a genius with such a noble character, unquestionable integrity, and magnanimity care about money? Therefore, he directly took it away and used it on someone who needed it more. It was the best. Tai Jing's embezzlement of the money was justified. Yin Yang soon found out about Wu Ying's actions. Facing Shui Wu's questioning gaze, Yin Yang was silent for a long time. Boss, how should we handle this? Let him be. Yin Yang sighed. Shui Wu was rather reluctant. But he's one of the culprits. We can't just let him be, can we? Although Shui Wu did not say it out loud, he was more or less indignant that Yin Yang had spared Wu Ying the last time. The only difference between his mentality and Yin Yang's was that Yin Yang would sometimes choose to prioritize the bigger picture under certain conditions. Shui Wu, on the other hand, was much more straightforward. If one had done a bad thing, one would be a bad person for life. One should be killed. It had to be said that such thinking was rather extreme. Let him be. Yin Yang said. You have to assist him in finding his disciples. You must investigate the background of these disciples and ensure that they are pure. Shui Wu heaved a deep sigh. He did not speak for a long time. Yin Yang frowned. Is there a problem? I only have one request. Shui Wu said boldly. When Wu Ying dies in the future, no matter how he dies, I want to see his corpse. Chapter 717. The wind blew and the clouds surged, rising swiftly but dissipating just as swiftly. An unprecedented martial world catastrophe had begun in Tiantang City and ended in Tiantang City. Although many people had died during this period of time, and the entire east district of Tiantang City had been reduced to ruins, there was almost no loss to Tiantang City itself. What was called a scene of devastation and ruins could only be rebuilt. It was not necessarily a bad thing for the buildings to be razed to the ground. There could not be construction without destruction. The destruction had been completed, and the rebuilding process was just around the corner. The East District that had been renovated would definitely be cleaner and more uniform than any other district. It was entirely predictable. This was in fact a good thing for Yutong. As for the number of casualties, 99% of them were martial artists. Whether it was martial artists or assassins, none of them had much to do with Yutong. On the other hand, the number of martial artists who had received Yutong's grace and returned their remains after this battle was no less than 100,000. At the very least, it was a great gain in terms of reputation. Most importantly, The assassin organizations that had been worrying Yutong were completely wiped out after this battle. Out of the hundreds of thousands of famous assassins who made a living out of killing, only 5 managed to escape in the end. Furthermore, these 5 people were released after receiving a favor from the Demon King. Therefore, to Yutong there was really no longer a need to worry about assassinations, not almost. From now on, for a very, very long time, it would be difficult to find a market for hiring assassins in the entire continent. Furthermore, this situation was a great thing for the officials and magnates of the entire continent. After all, the wealthier and more influential a person was, the more they were afraid of death. Illness and assassination had always been things that wealthy people feared. Now that half of them would not be able to haunt them for a very long time, how could they not be elated? Therefore, after this incident, Yutong's reputation, whether it was in the imperial court or outside, had risen to a relatively high level. The only one who was unhappy and unlucky was probably Yutong's crown prince. What? I sent someone to snatch the Dragonhide treasure map? And killed countless top-notch assassins in 3 rounds? The crown prince was dumbfounded when he heard the report. His handsome face turned pale. When did I give such an order? How is that possible? The crown prince's 6 armies? The crown prince was dumbfounded. It's true that they belong to the crown prince's residence, but that's only in name, okay? Since when did I, the crown prince, command those people? These troops are all under my father's control. How could they possibly listen to my orders? If I could mobilize them, wouldn't I have? These were heartfelt words. Although the crown prince's 6th command consisted of only about 10,000 men, they were the most elite combat force in Yutong's army. Be it their cultivation base or their weapons and equipment, they were the cream of the crop. However, it was only a title. Even the crown prince himself had never thought of attacking this army. He didn't dare to, because none of them really listened to the crown prince. Otherwise, even if it was a sneak attack, even if it was an opportunity to strike, even if the target was exhausted, how could it be possible to annihilate so many top-notch assassins with 3 volleys of arrows? If these people really listened to His Highness the Crown Prince's orders, His Highness the Crown Prince would probably wake up laughing in his dreams. He really wanted it to be a reality. But, someone invite General Li here. I have something to ask him. His Highness's face slowly turned menacing. Your Highness, General Li said. He's busy with military affairs. Your Highness's arrangements have been completed. It's a waste of time to travel back and forth. Your Highness, please don't be so courteous. There's plenty of time for rewards and whatnot. The Crown Prince was furious. The arrangements I've made have been completed? There's no need to be courteous? There's even a reward? Bastard! His Highness sprung up and roared. This is framing. This is fabricating something out of nothing. This is slandering the prince. This is a huge scapegoat on my head. How can there be a future for me? His Highness was about to go mad. How could he admit to such a thing? Even if he really wanted to do so, he would never have said it so clearly. You've done it. There's plenty of time for you to do it. Not to mention that I didn't give you any orders. Even if it was really my intention, how can you explain yourself by letting 5 of the scariest assassins escape? I'm the one who invited them here. Now it's me who wants to kill them. And I've already killed tens of thousands of their brothers. Such an irreconcilable feud has been planted on me. Even jumping into the lunar river won't be able to wash it clean. From now on, almost everyone in this world won't have to worry about assassins anymore. But I, the Crown Prince, will have to live in fear day and night. There's still me to be afraid of. Hen Bieli Hongzhan, or even the 5 peerless assassins working together to assassinate him at any time, anywhere, and at any moment. His Highness's face was contorted as he roared and cursed in a frenzy. Now His Highness had basically become a general without an army. Other than a few rotten scholars, the rest did not have the slightest bit of strength left. His strategists were killed one by one. His teachers were killed. His guards, those who could be considered experts, were all wiped out. The Crown Prince thought about it carefully, and was shocked to find that the only person he could discuss something with was the Crown Princess. Unknowingly, the talents around him, the heir to the Eastern Palace, had withered. There was no one he could use. Your Highness, this is obviously a trap set by His Majesty, King Xiaoyao, and the military. The Crown Princess looked worried. Other than being unsure if His Majesty is unaware of it or has acquiesced, the military and King Xiaoyao are definitely involved. The Crown Prince asked blankly, "Why is that?" The Crown Princess answered, "How can Your Highness not see the current situation? What they're doing is nothing more than clearing a path for someone. Your Highness is the rightful heir to the throne of Yutong. How can you not be their biggest obstacle?" The Crown Prince said, "That's right. This must have been planned by Yun Yang, Taizheng, and the others. They want to force me into a dead end. What a wild ambition." The Crown Princess lowered her head and said, "Now that the situation is dire, it's useless to pursue the matter. Your Highness, the situation is clear now. It's over, and your position as the heir to the Eastern Palace is fated to be lost. If you continue to force it, I'm afraid you'll have to pay with your life as well. Your Highness, please plan for a retreat as soon as possible. It's more important to preserve your life." The Crown Princess looked defeated as well, but she could see things clearer than the Crown Prince. She knew that her man had no chance of Yutong's throne anymore. If he persisted, it would only be the end of the game. There was no chance at all. Recalling the time when she had just become the Crown Princess, she had dreamed of being the mother of the world and standing side by side with the Crown Prince more than once. Now no, it had been a long time since she had given up on this extravagant hope. The Crown Prince heaved a long sigh. "The problem is, even if I'm willing to defile myself and abandon my position as the Crown Prince, it's hard to keep my life. They've let go of the 5 pinnacle assassins in this world this time. And the biggest enemy of these 5 assassins is me. This battle has cut off my future and my life." The Crown Prince seemed to have aged a lot in an instant. "I have nowhere else to go." Chapter 718. The Crown Prince was distraught and filled with fear. It was too terrifying. Who knew when he would be decapitated with a single slash and lose his life? Such a possibility had been thoroughly imprinted in the Crown Prince's mind, giving him the urge to cry out loud just thinking about it. Indeed, facing the ambush of 5 top-notch assassins at any time, it was difficult to be safe even if he hired Ling Xiaozui and Guda Cho as his bodyguards. No matter how good the bodyguards were, they could only protect him for a while. But could they protect him forever? Yet the enmity between the Crown Prince and Hen Bieli and the rest was irreconcilable. The 100,000 assassins were all dead, killed by the martial artists. However, His Highness the Crown Prince's final move was enough for the 5 top assassins to pin all their hatred on the Crown Prince. Furthermore, it was deeply rooted. The Crown Princess sighed, looking at the Crown Prince pitifully. He had long known that it was impossible, yet he still held on to his wild thoughts and refused to give in, struggling blindly on the brink of death. Now all his escape routes had been completely cut off. All his escape routes had been cut off as well. What else could he do? Now that things had come to this, who could he blame? However, it's not like there's no way out of this situation. The Crown Princess sighed. At this moment, there's still one person who can turn the situation around and save our lives. His Highness perked up upon hearing that. Who? Is it Father? It's a pity that even Father can't do anything to Hen Bieli and the rest. The Crown Princess said slowly. I'm not talking about Father, but Yun Yang, young Master Yun. The Crown Princess's words were earth-shattering. His Highness was stunned and speechless for a moment. His Highness the Crown Prince has come to visit? Yun Yang looked at Lao Mei, the corners of his eyes and brows filled with surprise. Yes. Invite him in. A meaningful smile hung on the corners of Yin Yang's lips. The arrival of the visitor was unexpected. But how could it not be reasonable when one thought about it? Yun Xiaoyao looked at Yun Yang, his lips moving before he finally sighed and said, You handle it. I have to excuse myself. What if His Highness the Crown Prince hugged his thigh and begged for mercy? What should he do? No matter what, he was still the Crown Prince's uncle, his blood relative. Although there is a saying that people need face and trees need bark, isn't it true that a person's conscience is also a sense of shame? Why can't they do it? Yin Yang smiled faintly. Very well, you may go ahead. He said leisurely. I have a lot of experience in dealing with this guy. You only want to live? Yin Yang looked at His Highness the Crown Prince in front of him. His Highness the Crown Prince of Yutong was like a rooster that had completely lost its fight, completely devoid of spirit. Yes. The Crown Prince's eyes were lifeless, and he was emaciated. Only 2 nights had passed, but the Crown Prince, who was originally as handsome as jade, suddenly seemed to have aged 30 to 50 years. Even the hair on his temples had turned white. The goal that he had fought for half of his life, he had thought that it was close at hand and within his reach, but in a single night, it disappeared without a trace. His Highness the Crown Prince had never been one with a strong will to begin with. Naturally, he could not bear such a heavy blow. If it were not for Yin Yang's life-saving straw, he would have either committed suicide in a few more days, or he would have gone mad from depression to insanity. Live, Yin Yang mused. The Crown Prince said, "I've written the memorial, requesting to be demoted to the position of Crown Prince. I've even found excuses for myself. No talent, no virtue, no character, no looks, no morals, no morals, no morals, no morals, no morals, rebelling against the superiors, bullying men and women, a man's unmentionable illness." His Highness the Crown Prince was really going all out, even using the excuse of a man's unmentionable illness. His sincerity was overwhelming. However, he had to do it. The Emperor had already agreed that the martial world's conflict would take place in the east of the city, but he had ordered to intervene. Although the truth was that he had been framed, the Crown Prince knew that he could not escape from it. With so many people working together, the Board of Military and the government had already joined hands. Even if it was black, it had to be white. There was no need for any evidence, nor was there any hope of turning the tables. The Crown Prince's expression was blank. "I only hope that young Master Yin can save my life. Everything else is inconsequential." Yin Yang said faintly, "I've seen your Highness' sincerity, but there's one more charge that you haven't mentioned. This alone is insufficient sincerity." His Highness the Crown Prince lifted his head abruptly. "What charge? What charge? I'll just admit to it. Why didn't you mention a word about the murder of the 9 Supremes? Even if you've listed 1,000 charges, how can you talk about sincerity if you don't mention this?" Yin Yang's gaze was like lightning, his words sharp as a sword. His Highness the Crown Prince felt as if he had been struck by lightning upon hearing his words. He felt dizzy and his mouth was agape, unable to speak for a moment. He looked at Yin Yang in horror, his face pale. Yin Yang's cold gaze met the Crown Prince's and said, "Don't misunderstand me. I'm trying to trick you. The murder of the 9 Supremes has been investigated by many parties, and there's a conclusion to it. However, you're connected to every single party. Although you've been used by the various forces throughout the entire process, ultimately becoming a passive puppet who has been deceived by the Four Seasons Tower, who thinks highly of himself, who thinks that he's in control of the entire situation. You think that you're the one in charge of the battle at Tianxian Mountain, but in fact, every step of your plan has been pushed by others, intentionally or unintentionally. However, you've still done this. Your malice towards the 9 Supremes is real. It's not fake at all." The Crown Prince's face was as white as a sheet, his gaze filled with panic. "I only have one question for you. Why did you plot against the 9 Supremes? What's the reason?" Yin Yang asked in a low voice. "You are the heir to the throne. No matter how powerful the 9 Supremes are, no matter how reputable they are, the empire they conquer will ultimately belong to you. It can be said that they are conquering the empire for you." Yin Yang asked in confusion, "Why do you want to destroy your own empire? Give me a reason." This was what Yin Yang was most confused about. The Four Seasons Tower's motive for plotting against the 9 Supremes was obvious. However, the Crown Prince's plotting against the 9 Supremes had almost dragged his own country into a swamp, and was on the brink of annihilation. This was inexplicable and confusing. The Crown Prince hung his head low. After a long time he said hoarsely, I saw Big Brother during the New Year that year." Yin Yang frowned. The Crown Prince covered his entire face. Back then, Father had already spread the news a few years ago that Big Brother had died of a sudden illness. But I saw Big Brother, alive and well, outside Father's royal study. I was stunned then, stunned for a long time. That night, Imperial father was dead drunk. He looked at me, his eyes filled with reluctance and unwillingness. He only said one sentence before he was completely drunk and unconscious. Yin Yang sucked in a deep breath. What did His Majesty say? Chapter 719. Yin Yang's expression changed when he heard the explanation. This was the so-called reason. The emperor had actually let it slip. Furthermore, it had been leaked to someone who should never have known. His Highness the Crown Prince, the party involved. At that time, there was no one else around, and the nearest person was several feet away. Father's words were very vague. No one heard it except for me. But at that time, I was stunned again, just like the moment when I accidentally saw Big Brother. No, I was just panicking and at a loss. Hearing Father's words, I felt like I was struck by lightning, unable to calm down. Yin Yang sighed. You don't have to go on. He finally understood. Everything was clear now. The emperor had always had such a plan in his heart. Then it was no wonder. Honestly, this plan was easy to execute. As long as the world was unified and the world was completed, this world would belong to Yutong's territory. Then, the eldest prince's identity as one of the 9 supremes would no longer be a secret. The fact that the eldest prince was the leader of the 9 supremes, Supreme Earth, would be a bright light in Yutong's conquest of the world. At that time, all he had to do was to issue an imperial edict at the right time, stating the reason why the news of the first prince's sudden death was spread all those years ago. After making such a huge sacrifice, it was completely logical for the first prince to return and ascend to the throne today. None of Yutong's subjects and people would object to it. There was only one person who was an exception. His Highness the Crown Prince, the heir to the East Palace on the surface. It was then that His Highness the Crown Prince knew about His Majesty's plan. His title as the Crown Prince was only a decoration on the surface. Yin Yang heaved a long sigh. Looking down at the old and desolate Crown Prince, he was speechless and conflicted. Should he kill or not kill the Crown Prince? To kill or not to kill? It all depended on Yin Yang's decision. Logically speaking, the Crown Prince deserved to die for what he had done. However, if one were to consider his position, his choice would be detrimental to the country and disloyal to the emperor. But it was understandable for him. It was only right for the heir of the royal family to do whatever it took to ascend to the throne. It was only right that the winner took all. Come to think of it, it was the Crown Prince's downfall today. But if he had perished at Tianxian Cliff that day, and had not saved the poisoned emperor of Yutong, the position of the next emperor of Yutong might have long fallen to the Crown Prince. By then, whether Yutong would be annexed or destroyed by other countries, His Highness the Crown Prince would have won the war of succession. For a moment, Yin Yang's thoughts were a jumbled mess. It was difficult for him to make a decision. In a trance, he felt as if 2 pairs of eyes were watching him from afar. Old Ninth, my brother, is still my brother. Supreme Earth's words. Supreme Earth did not say it out loud. However, since he was willing to make such a sacrifice for his country and family, he probably wouldn't want to see his younger brother die in his own hands, right? But what about the other brothers? There's still a way out if you want to live. A cold glint flashed across Yin Yang's eyes. His gaze was misty because the 8 masked silhouettes seemed to have slipped past his eyes just a moment ago. His decision was made in that instant. He enunciated each word clearly. No matter what, you have to die once first before we can talk about the future. Having been the Crown Prince for so long, the Crown Prince naturally understood the deeper meaning behind Yin Yang's words. Without hesitation he nodded and said, I will follow young Master Yun's arrangements. Faking one's death and hiding one's identity to deal with the current situation was the best solution. However, with the Crown Prince's current capability, it would be difficult to complete it, not to mention the countless hidden dangers. However, if this plan were to be arranged by Yin Yang, it would be a completely different matter. The success rate would increase tremendously. At the end of this situation, perhaps His Highness the Crown Prince of Yutong would perish from this world. But he could continue to live. At this moment, the Crown Prince felt that he had understood everything and could feel Yin Yang's kindness and sincerity. Yin Yang nodded and said nothing more. Watching the crown prince walk out of the residence of Yin with his back hunched, Yun Yang could clearly feel that this matter had finally come to an end. This crown prince, who had been a decoration in the Empire of Yutong for years, the heir to the Eastern Palace, was truly disheartened and had no more lingering feelings. However, could it be that I've schemed and schemed so many times just for you to be disheartened? Yun Yang stood with his arms behind his back. Smoke flashed across his eyes, eventually turning into a tinge of viciousness. It was an indescribable menace. Yin Xiaoyao walked out from behind the screen and let out a long sigh. King Yin could not help but let out the desire to sigh in his heart. Yin Yang, what are you doing? What is your ultimate goal after going through so much trouble? King Xiaoyao looked melancholy and puzzled. The situation had basically come to an end. Yun Yang had gained a lot from this battle. He had killed Ouyang Xiaoxi, whom he had to kill, and wiped out 99% of the world's top-notch assassins. He had even taken the opportunity to knock down the crown prince of Yutong. But the price he had to pay was equally great. Just the Dragonhide treasure map alone had made Yin Xiaoyao wringing his hands and sighing endlessly. Especially now that Yun Yang had shifted the attention of the 5 top-notch assassins to the crown prince. It was a beautiful move, but it inevitably made some people unhappy. The some people here were probably referring to the Emperor of Yutong and Yin Xiaoyao himself. What is it? Yin Yang asked with a smile. Haven't you gone too far? The bloodline of the royal family. Yin Xiaoyao sighed. After this battle, the crown prince has been completely wiped out by you. The third prince has also been crippled by you, and he's even been driven mad by fear. The fourth prince, although we're at peace for now, I don't think you'll let him go. There's also the fifth and sixth princes. These two fellows have been recruiting too smoothly during this period of time. Although I don't know the exact situation, I can still be sure that all of this is your doing. I even suspect how many of their so-called subordinates actually listen to them. Can there be even half of them? I'm not surprised that you've targeted the crown prince, the third prince, and even the fourth prince, but the fifth prince is only 13 this year, and the sixth prince is only 12. Yin Xiaoyao said. Aren't you being a little too ruthless when you've already started planning to target them? I didn't hide any of this from you, Yun Yang said faintly. Yin Xiaoyao sighed. Yes, if you didn't want me to know, I probably wouldn't even be able to get these tiny clues. So I think you've probably made corresponding arrangements for the other princes, haven't you? It's better to prepare for a rainy day than to nip it in the bud. Yin Yang was still nonchalant about it. Everything you've done is to pave the way for Bao, to avoid all possible accidents? Yin Xiaorao asked. It's true that I've paved the way for him, but it's another matter to avoid all possible accidents, Yin Yang said honestly. After all, there are still some things that I don't want to do. If I were to do all of them, it would be truly paving the way for him. Oh, Yin Xiaoyao asked. Yin Yang waved his arms and said, Actually, the source of these princes' ambitions all comes from the harem. Yin Xiaoyao shuddered when he heard him and exclaimed, What do you want to do? Don't you dare mess around. My royal brother won't let you do as you please. Chapter 720. Yin Xiaoyao closed his eyes and sucked in a deep breath. It was true that not everyone could stop Yin Yang now. At least, no one in the Empire of Yutong could, whether it was Yin Xiaoyao or Yutong's emperor, Yu Peiza. As long as he wanted to do something, Yin Yang would accomplish it even if the entire Empire of Yutong banded together to stop him. It had already come to this. I've done what I can, Yin Yang said. Everything else will be left to bear fruit in the future. Yin Xiaoyao said, Have you ever thought that Bauer doesn't live up to your expectations and can't live up to your expectations? No matter how you teach him, he won't grow up to be what we want him to be. What then? Yin Yang said, Nothing. Let him squander as he pleases. As long as the empire that the 9 supremes have painstakingly built isn't lost to an outsider. He grinned. That's enough. He laughed. Didn't the elders build the empire and earn the fortune to pass it on to their descendants? If the descendants can live up to expectations, they can defend it and develop it. If they can't, shouldn't they be defeated by him as well? Yin Yang laughed heartily. How can the empire that his father and uncle fought for be given to others? When the one who built the empire wants to retreat, who else should the ready-made empire be given to if not him? If not him, who else should be defeated? Besides, like you said, it's still uncertain what he'll look like. Who knows, he might be a saint throughout the ages, a strong grandfather who surpasses his ancestors. Who can say for sure? Yun Xiaoyao could only sigh after he said that, not saying anything else. After I die, it doesn't matter how my property and my son are ruined, it doesn't matter. This was probably what Yun Yang was thinking at the moment. Be it carefree or selfish, it was sincere and directed at his heart. Yun Xiaoyao had gone into closed-door cultivation. He needed some time to digest Yun Yang's words. In addition, he was extremely conflicted. Yun Yang had nothing to hide at this point, but a difficult problem had been left for Yun Xiaoyao. Should he tell His Majesty the Emperor? Why was this multiple-choice question placed before him all the time, forcing him to choose? Each time he had chosen this side. Yun Xiaoyao sighed in his study. Have the Tinyama kings and Feng Mafei returned yet? Yun Yang asked Lao Mei. No, there's no news yet, but it's still within the permitted time, Lao Mei replied. Yes. Yun Yang did not speak anymore. He closed his eyes deep in thought. The next morning, His Royal Highness the Crown Prince submitted a memorial, admitting that he had no talent and no virtue, and requested to be removed from the position of Crown Prince. Looking at the Crown Prince's letter, the Emperor was stunned for a long time. The expression on his face was complicated. There was relief, understanding, pain, and reluctance. But in the end, he waved his brush and approved the request. Then he conferred the former Crown Prince the title of King Anil, and granted him Dragon City. Dragon Sealing City was located in the south of Yutong, 27,000 miles away from the capital, Tiantang City. It would take at least a year for an ordinary person to go back and forth between the two places. His Majesty considered it for a long time before issuing another order. Depart for the fiefdom within a month. After that, he was not allowed to return without the imperial edict. From receiving the request, approving the request, conferring the title of king, and assigning the fiefdom, there were few obstructions throughout the entire process. His Majesty did not even ask for the opinions of the officials. It was as if he was just going through the motions, asking a few questions, and deciding everything. It was a completely arbitrary decision. Many of the officials in the imperial court were puzzled, but those who were truly in high positions took it as a matter of course, and had no doubts at all. They did not get involved throughout the entire process, and did not speak a word. They did not even say a word to mediate the situation. This was a first in the history of Tianxian continent. It was unknown if there would be no one to repeat it, but it was definitely unprecedented. When Yun Yang heard the news, there was no change in his expression. He could only smile faintly. His Majesty has really put in a lot of effort. He's trying to protect his son's life. Shangguan Lingxiu, who was beside him, said, His Majesty is a parent as well. This is only reasonable. It's not surprising. Yun Yang smiled and said, But not everyone can protect the second prince's life. His Majesty's painstaking effort will inevitably be in vain. Forget it, let's go see Bao and the rest. It's been a while since I've trained with them. Do I need to explain that the second prince is the dethroned crown prince? In the backyard of the residence of Yun, Bao was still young, still a child, but he had grown a head taller in this 1 year. He already looked like a young teenager. At this moment, a little person dressed in a white brocade robe was holding a book in his hand, his eyes glued to it without blinking. Beside the little person was a teacher, who was explaining in detail to him. Behind Bao there were a few other children who were reading as well. However, their frowns were a clear indication of their dislike of books. Prosperity the people suffer, death the people suffer. Bao recited and said, Since prosperity and death are all suffering, how can one not suffer? Beside him, the scholar smiled and said, Prosperity and death are all suffering. They have different meanings. Death, of course, doesn't need to be considered. It's the fall of a nation, of course, suffering. Prosperity, however, doesn't mean prosperity, it means rising. Since there are people who rise, there are people who fall. Similarly, the rise of a nation will be accompanied by the fall of another nation. This process is all suffering. Therefore, prosperity and death are all suffering. However, if a nation can be at peace for a long time, the people won't have to suffer. The hearts of the people are the most simple. As long as they have food to eat, they won't complain about suffering. Then, how can a nation be at peace for a long time? Bauer frowned, his young face filled with doubt and pity. How can everyone have a good meal? A clear voice rang with a smile. Peace and stability for a long time is a huge problem. It requires at least the efforts of a few generations. It was Yin Yang's voice. Uncle Yun, Bauer called out happily, and was about to charge towards the voice. For some reason, he held himself back and looked at the two teachers in front of him, obviously waiting for their signal. Go on. The teachers chuckled. Only then did Bauer rush over and reach Yin Yang's side in a flash, hugging his arm. Yin Yang squatted down and picked up Bauer's tiny frame, continuing to explain with a chuckle. Only with the tireless efforts of a few generations can the nation prosper, and the people be at peace. Every citizen can have a good meal. The first emperor who founded the nation and established the dynasty had many things to do. The second-generation emperor mostly focused on recuperation. The third-generation emperor guarded the foundation and hid the wealth from the people. Only when it came to the fourth-generation emperor's rule can the nation be at peace, and the people be well fed and clothed. However, if this can go on for a long time, the world will truly not be suffering. Yin Yang looked into Bauer's eyes and said, Bauer, how to make the world not suffer is truly a great knowledge. You have to learn well, and put it into action. Only then will the people and the world be blessed. Bauer asked, Then how should I do it? How do I start? Chapter 721. Bauer asked in bewilderment. Wouldn't it be exhausting to learn so much? Yin Yang could not help but chuckle. It's only natural for a superior to know more. Of course, when the time comes, you only need to do one thing. Bauer asked when? Which knowledge? Yin Yang smiled without saying a word. After a while he said softly, Actually, the world is a family. If you want your family not to be bullied, to be fed and clothed, to be free from suffering, you only need one knowledge. If you want everyone in the world to be fed and clothed, you only need one knowledge. Bauer seemed to understand, blinking his big eyes in confusion. The two teachers did not comment on Yin Yang's teachings, but they looked like they were listening attentively as well. Hearing Yin Yang's words, however, they were suddenly shaken. Of course, they understood what Yin Yang was saying, but there were some things that they dared not say. He only muttered, one knowledge, I only need one knowledge. They could not help but think. Looking at Yin Yang's gaze, they could not help but feel a little strange. Bauer was still too young. Yin Yang had long prohibited him from getting involved in politics. What Yin Yang was doing now, however, was planting seeds in Bauer's heart, becoming one with him, waiting for them to sprout and grow. There were some things that they dared not say or could not understand, but Yin Yang's words were enough to make it clear. However, the premise was that those who understood would understand, while those who did not would only walk another path. Could Bauer really understand? Looking at Bauer's contemplative face, the two teachers could not help chuckling bitterly. Understand? Only now did he realize that as teachers, we really don't even dare to ask the three words. Do we understand? Bauer, you only need to know that the word home is enough. To an ordinary citizen, home is a family of 3 or 4 people. To a king, what is home? Bauer might not have understood this, but the two teachers felt like they had been struck by lightning as they lifted their heads to look at Yin Yang. It was confirmed. Today, Yin Yang was not here to teach Bauer, but to teach the two of them as teachers. What is home? The two Confucian scholars suddenly felt a heavy weight on their hearts. Aunt. Seeing that Shangguan Lingxiu had arrived, the other children crowded around her as well, tugging at her hands and complaining. Auntie, what's the use of us learning all that nonsense here? Letting us go back to train is the right thing to do. Staying alive on the battlefield is our top priority. What can these books do? Shangguan Lingxiu was initially all smiles as she watched the learning atmosphere, but her expression darkened when she heard this. Nonsense. What do you mean by a nuisance? Deciding the outcome of a battle from 1,000 miles away is a military principle. Are you really not going to move? If you dare to spout nonsense again, even if your teacher doesn't care about you, you will still be punished according to the family rules. The children immediately hung their heads dejectedly, but no one dared to retort. Family rules? The Shangguan family of generals' discipline was not something an ordinary person could endure. They were all dispirited. Yun Yang could not help but be amused by the situation. He could not blame Shangguan Lingxiu for throwing a tantrum. These young fellows from the Shangguan family were all good fighters. Fighting in a group was like eating honey. They did not slack off even when they were studying military books and scrolls. Only the knowledge in books and the path of the sage had left them numb. During this period of time in the residence of Yin, he had been tormented to the point of whining every day. Even if there was some improvement, the improvement was extremely limited and negligible. They were indeed the children of the Shangguan family of generals, living up to the name family of generals. There's no rush, there's no rush. Yun Yang comforted her. The heirs of the Shangguan family of generals should have the Shangguan family's nature. The reason I've taken them in here is firstly to learn as much as I can, secondly, to pave a new path for their future. Thirdly, it's to train their temperament. There are actually other reasons, but it will only be beneficial to them. There's no need to be overly concerned about their nature. After all, their positions in the future will be in the board of military or the battlefield. Yun Yang said. Besides, the Shangguan family of generals will have no worries in the future. No worries in the future. Shangguan Lingxiu mumbled the words, unable to hold back a mixture of sadness and joy. No worries in the future. How many years had it been since the Shangguan family of generals had struggled with these words like a nightmare? Now that it had been completely resolved in Yun Yang's hands, they no longer had to worry about the future. It was a permanent solution. Recalling the new path that Yun Yang had mentioned earlier, the Shangguan family of generals might really be able to prosper forever with the foundation that these young fellows had laid here in the residence of Yin. Of course, there was still a precondition. No rebellion. Putting everything else aside, just the childhood friends that the Shangguan family of generals had with Bao, would not be a problem. Therefore, Shangguan Lingxiu, who had always shouldered the heavy responsibility of the family of generals, could finally let go of the family's burden. The sudden feeling of relief almost made her cry tears of joy. Among these 6 nephews of yours, only 4 of them can really go to the battlefield in the future. Yun Yang spoke to Shangguan Lingxiu through voice transmission. The other 2 are the ones who play dumb. It's best for them to be in the board of military in the future. You understand. You understand. How could Shangguan Lingxiu not understand? She spoke to Yun Yang through voice transmission, choking with sobs. I understand, I really do. I'm already very content now. But do you know how I wish that the number you're talking about could be reversed? Yun Yang was speechless. The 3 children of the Shangguan family of generals came forward together, very angry. Auntie, you're crying. Who bullied you? Let's go beat him to death. Another one was hesitant, stopping there and pretending to read a book. The other 2 glanced at each other, before lowering their heads to focus on their books. Yun Yang and Shangguan Lingxiu watched closely, as the 6 children reacted differently in the face of the sudden incident. They all had different expressions. Yun Yang's expression was one of deep thought. Shangguan Lingxiu was comforted. Only Bao rubbed his palms together and said, Who dares bully my uncle? Shangguan Lingxiu rolled her eyes. Bully your uncle? Would the entire continent's population be enough? In the palace, His Majesty had purposely asked Qiu Jianhan to stay after handling the national affairs. Since the Battle of the Fortress of Resilience, Qiu Jianhan had been in a coma. Every time His Majesty wanted to talk to someone to relieve his boredom, he realized in shock that he had no one to keep him around. He had been rather lonely for quite some time. Now that Qiu Jianhan had finally woken up and had fully recovered, the emperor could not help but revert to his usual self amidst his delight. Perhaps he had summoned old Marshal Qiu more frequently than before, asking him to stay for a chat almost every day after the court session ended. The situation made Qiu Jianhan groan incessantly. Who could stand having to work overtime every day? Others could knock off at the appointed time, but he had to work for a few more hours every day. It did not seem to be a good thing to have too much of the emperor's grace. You often ask for this old man's company, but why don't you give me a higher salary? You're ordering me around for nothing. Qiu Jianhan grumbled inwardly, but his face was serious. What orders does your majesty have? I am strict in everything, and follow the law in everything. I have no mercy. Can the second prince's life be spared? His majesty was an understanding man, going straight to the point. I'll say a few extra words here. Words from the heart. Country. Family. I've been a soldier, I've been educated, but I don't understand this problem myself. Therefore, this chapter is not a lecture. I think I have 2 points. If the country needs me, I can go to the battlefield and do whatever it takes. If the family needs me, I can do whatever it takes, even if I have to go against everything. Therefore, I'm a little lost when I write this. When my family is bullied, I can do whatever it takes, even if I have to suffer for it. There's no doubt about this. If the country is bullied, I feel that, to a certain extent, I'll give it all. However, when it's not to a certain extent, I might have the thought of peace. However, when I think of it this way, I feel that it doesn't match the theme of this book. Yet this is my true self. Writing up to this point is also the end of my career's confusion. Therefore, the next book will not be about family and country. Chapter 722. Qiu Jianhan was taken aback, rolling his eyes inwardly. You're asking me about this? How would I know? Besides, what's the use of being strict and impartial? Your Majesty, why do you say so? This old official does not understand your Majesty's meaning. Please enlighten me, Qiu Jianhan said. Is Supreme Cloud determined to kill him? The emperor asked. Is it possible to let him go? Qiu Jianhan's forehead was sweating. How would this old official know? Ask for me, the emperor said without hesitation. Qiu Jianhan was stunned. This old official, where should I ask? Ask for you? Who can help me ask then? Don't you know that Supreme Cloud has always been elusive? Only he can find someone. Who can find him? The emperor said. This is settled then. Go and ask. OL II has given up everything, he has nothing left. Why must he be so ruthless? No matter what, he is still my blood. Qiu Jianhan wanted to say more, but His Majesty had already asked him to leave. Go. I know you have a way. I believe in you. Qiu Jianhan left the palace gate in bewilderment. This matter? How should he explain it? Although it was not common for an emperor to encounter unreasonable officials, it was still a common occurrence. For example, Emperor of Yutang's 3 most trusted officials, Qiu Jianhan, Leng Daoyin, and Fang Qingtian, were all shrewd with age and eventually became the perfect example of rogues. Therefore, the Emperor of Yutang had a way to deal with rogues. Furthermore, he had even more ways to deal with other rogues. What was the most effective way to deal with rogues? Rogues usually had the upper hand, but when rogues met rogues, it was a matter of who was more roguish. His Majesty was saying, I don't want to be reasonable, so what if I don't want to be reasonable? Qiu Jianhan was very tired mentally. As the saying went, a hero's background was not important, while a roguish sage was not important. Now, Qiu Jianhan really wanted to say that a roguish background was not important at all. What should a courtier do when encountering an unreasonable and hooligan emperor? Sigh. Qiu Jianhan truly felt as if he had aged decades in this afternoon. He sighed endlessly when he got home, feeling helpless and helpless. Old gangster Qiu was truly at a loss. He wanted to give in and compromise, but could he really ask? That was clearly impossible. At such a delicate time, he believed that the emperor had long since paid attention to his every move. Even if he went to the toilet to take a bath or change his clothes, he would still be closely watched. If he were to look for Yin Yang now, the only outcome would be to expose Yin Yang. There was no such thing as a fluke. If Supreme Cloud's identity was exposed, Qiu Jianhan dared not imagine what would happen next. Therefore, when he returned home, other than sighing and feeling helpless, he did not do anything else. Then he sighed inwardly. Once it came to the matter of his own bloodline, even the wisest emperor would be blinded by a leaf. Did the Emperor of Yutang really not know the possible consequences of exposing Supreme Cloud's identity? He obviously knew, But he still chose to force himself to think of a solution. He was still willing to believe that Supreme Cloud had the ability to deal with any crisis. Currently, his priority was to save his son's life, even if his son was not worth saving. As a ruler, as a parent, there were many things that one could not help but be selfish, even when they knew the truth. Old gangster Chiu, as a subject, understood this, but he could only sigh helplessly. Compared to old Marshal Chiu's helplessness, this period of time was a rare period of relaxation for Yun Yang. After the incident, everything had been settled. For a time, there was nothing to worry about. His country was at peace, and he was at ease. Therefore, he was left to polish his martial arts skills in the residence of Yin. It had become a routine for him to spar with Ji Lingxi every day, at least 3 to 5 times a day. Although Yun Yang's cultivation base was improving with each passing day, the endless divine art was progressing steadily, and he had Emmy's return as well as the help of his cheat. It was still insignificant compared to Ji Lingxi's improvement. Ji Lingxi did not even need to use the red light shield now. She could beat Yun Yang into submission with her own cultivation base alone. In spite of this, Yun Yang was not discouraged. He would rest and recuperate immediately when he was defeated, studying his techniques in between. When he had recovered and felt that he had improved, he would fight Ji Lingxi again. Ji Lingxi did not have much interest in such a contest in the beginning. After all, there was a great disparity between them. Her cultivation base had truly improved by leaps and bounds. No matter how flawless Yun Yang's techniques were, it was difficult for him to escape defeat when faced with an unparalleled force that was difficult to defend against. However, as they fought, she grew more and more spirited. After all, Ji Lingxi's cultivation base was growing too rapidly. Her state of mind, especially in actual combat, was far from being able to match it. Although Yun Yang's attack was weak, his recovery ability was astounding. He was the perfect sparring partner for Ji Lingxi to completely absorb the sudden increase in cultivation base and use it for her own. In addition, Ji Lingxi also wanted to see how long her strange method of cultivation base growth would last, and how far it would go before it was complete. Now Ji Lingxi could feel that her current cultivation base had very likely surpassed the level of Dao realm. As for the known cultivation realm in this world, it only stopped at the 9th tier of Dao realm. However, this knowledge was still not enough. Even though she had obviously surpassed the limits of this world, how could she confirm and proceed to the next step? What was the specific realm? There was no way forward. Ji Lingxi did not know anything about this, neither did Yun Yang. In fact, no one in the residence of Yin knew. Yun Xiaoyao, Lao Mei, Feng Mafei, none of them knew. Yun Yang had asked the 10 kings of the Yama underworld about this, but it was a pity that the 10 Yama kings were clueless about it as well. Instead, they had promised to ask on their master's behalf when he came out of his closed-door cultivation. Such a high-end question could only be answered clearly by those seniors and experts who were above the pinnacle. Yun Yang did not mind. After all, he had always thought that Ling Xiaozue and the rest would be back in a few days anyway. They should know about the level above Dao realm. If such a thing were to happen, perhaps it was the first time it had happened in this world. She had broken through the highest level that a cultivator could reach in this world, yet she did not know where she should go on the road ahead. That was not right. Although Ji Lingxi did not know the name of the road ahead, nor did she know where it led to, she was still walking on this path resolutely. She should be striding forward at an extremely high speed. Such a cultivation method was not intoxicating, but rather intoxicating. Chapter 723. Yun Yang was not someone who would always be abused. Although he was destined to be unable to do anything to Ji Lingxi in the short term, he could still do it to others. When the beatings were too much for him, he would find a softer way to retaliate. First, it was Dong Tianling and the other 3 young masters, along with all of their guards, who ganged up on Yun Yang. However, this formation had only lasted for a day before the 4 of them hung up the no challenge sign and played dead on their beds. I can't take this abuse anymore. Yun Yang's words of, "You're all going to do great things with me in the future. How can you be so lazy? Get up," were met with a snort of contempt from the 4 noble young masters, completely ignoring him. We've never had such great ambitions. From the very beginning, we've been most interested in eating and waiting to die in this world. To be able to level up happily and comfortably has already exceeded the limits of our greatest pursuit. Popinjays? What's so bad about popinjays? Looking at the world's popinjays, who else dares to say they're on par with the four of us other than you, boss? We're content, we're always happy. Boss, please spare us. We're really not made of that pinnacle material. Yun Yang was speechless and helpless in the face of the four young masters' tearful pleas and professional behavior of playing dead. Faced with such unmotivated fellows, Yun Yang was helpless even if he had 1,000 tricks up his sleeves. Are you all bragging when you say you're going to do great things with me? We do want to do great things, but there are prerequisites. The degree of hardship has to be within the limits of what we can handle. The fortress of resilience has already used up all of our ambition, loyalty, and spirit. Our future endeavors have to be built on something that isn't hard at all. It would be best if we could still live comfortably. Yes, it would be best if we could live comfortably and be envied by others, while accomplishing a great undertaking that others can only look up to. Faced with such arguments, Yun Yang had to suppress his urge to kill several times before he could do so. In fact, the four of them did not dare to say something directly. Even if we need to train to become strong, we can do it step by step. We don't want to become fat in one bite, and we refuse to be abused. Big brother, your strength is so much higher than ours. You want to spar with us, but in fact, you want to vent your frustrations. Do you think we don't know that? Do you really think we are stupid? You seem to be addicted to getting beaten up every day. But we don't have that kind of addiction. Besides, you were hit by a beauty, but we were hit by you. We are not masochists. And we will definitely not be your target for venting. Yun Yang did not have a suitable outlet to vent his frustrations when these fellows refused to cooperate. Helpless, he began to train his spiritual beasts instead. Thus, the 5 whiteys became his punching bags. Where's your monkey? Yin Yang's sudden question stunned Jilingxi. Jilingxi's beloved pet, the 1,000 illusion monkey, was a solid 8th level mystical beast, only slightly lower than the eclipse panther. However, the 1,000 illusion monkey was a spiritual species of heaven and earth, so its chances of leveling up were higher than the eclipse panthers. If the two were in the same level, the former's power would be a notch higher, especially the 1,000 illusion monkey's unique gift of being able to transform into a myriad of forms. Didn't I tell you? Jilingxi said. I sent the monkey out to look for something. Only the monkey can find something like this. Look for something? What is it? Yin Yang frowned. Oh, it's the beauty herb. Cough, one of the main ingredients of the exquisite monkey wine. Jilingxi's words were evasive, and her subsequent explanation was obviously an attempt to cover things up. Beauty herb. Yin Yang chuckled strangely. Jilingxi's embarrassment turned into anger. What are you laughing at? Are you itching again? Nothing. Yin Yang kept his mouth shut tactfully. Yin Yang did not know if the beauty herb was the main ingredient of the monkey wine, but he did know that the beauty herb had another effect. It could wash away the disguise that had been applied to one's face. It was obvious that Jilingxi was trying to remove the layer of ointment that he had applied on her. The reason she had used the ointment to disguise herself that day was mainly because of the threat from Lei Dongtian. However, with Jilingxi's current cultivation base and ability, dealing with Lei Dongtian would be like playing a game to her. She could kill him with a wave of her hand, so there was no need for her to worry anymore. There was no longer a need for the disguise ointment to exist. The ointment's effective time is coming to an end. It'll disappear in a few months at most. Why waste time looking for the beauty herb? Yin Yang's EQ was too low, so he spoke his mind. Jilingxi was enraged at once, and sparred with Yin Yang again. Shangguan Lingxiu, who was standing on the side, burst out laughing. She finally felt that Yin Yang did not understand his daughter's thoughts at all. His EQ was so low that it was insanely low. It was obvious that Jilingxi wanted to restore her original appearance as soon as possible. But what was the point of restoring her original appearance? As the saying went, a man would die for his bosom friend, while a woman would dress up for the man who loved her. Jilingxi wanted to restore her beauty as soon as possible, so of course, She wanted to show it to Yun Yang. However, not only did this fellow not appreciate her kindness, he had even exposed her daughter's thoughts in front of everyone. It was intolerable, unbearable. If you don't get beaten up, who will? Shangguan Lingxia was delighted. Today, Yun Yang seemed to have decided on one thing, to poke at her sore spot. Then, what about your little wolf? Ji Lingxi's expression darkened, her eyes rimmed with tears. He was beaten to death by Lei Dongtian the last time. Yin Yang's expression darkened as well. Hearing Lei Dongtian's name again, Yun Yang could not help but sigh. King waited for you to send resources, medicinal herbs, medicinal pills, and medicine over. Why did this fellow disappear just like that? Did he say he was here for revenge? Ever since he left here the last time, he had disappeared without a trace like a bird killing a rabbit. Could he have died on the way? Yin Yang mumbled. Compared to Tiantang City's peace and tranquility, the turbulence in the martial world was still unfolding. Starting from Tiantang City, it extended to all corners of the martial world. It was another tens of thousands of miles of pursuit. When Yun Yang had tossed the 2 pieces of treasure map, they had curled up into a ball. Therefore, during this period of time, no matter whose hands they ended up in, they were still intact. No one was foolish enough to separate them after obtaining them. Within this short period of time, the 2 pieces of treasure map had changed hands dozens of times. Along the way, countless mountains along the way had been smashed to pieces. Countless martial world people had participated in this battle. The sea of people fought from the south to the north, then from the north to the south. It was a frenzied battle. Chapter 724. Watching as more and more people died in the fight for the treasure maps, and the scale of the fight grew more and more terrifying, the 10 kings were increasingly shaken. When would this martial world catastrophe that started in Tiantang City end? Towards the end, he saw some experts who were not weaker than him jump out one by one, and then die a violent death. He saw some bold and skillful experts risk their lives to snatch the treasure map, but they were immediately blocked by others, surrounded, beaten up, and madly slaughtered. Putting themselves in their shoes, the 10 Yama kings felt a chill rising from the soles of their feet to the top of their heads. This is a catastrophe that has never been seen before. King Chujiang's eyebrows were twitching, his facial muscles twitching unconsciously. Perhaps, this is a martial world catastrophe that is rarely seen in 100,000 years. Even in the legends, I've never heard of a catastrophe of such a scale. Be it the number of people involved, the range of coverage, or the number of deaths, it's unprecedented. After this war, the entire martial world will be peaceful for many, many years. That's right. The number of top-notch experts in this world will be reduced by at least a third, maybe even more. The 10 kings could all see this, but they could do nothing about the current situation, and there was nothing they could do. Not only could they not stop it, they had to add fuel to the fire. Moreover, it was absolutely impossible even if a deity came out to stop the war now. Everyone's eyes were bloodshot. What good does this martial world catastrophe bring to Yun Yang if it continues? Why did he deliberately set up this trap? The 2 Dragonhide treasure maps are the real deal. First Court King Qingguang asked. Only with effort will there be returns. The benefits that Yun Yang can reap are endless. At least to him, the price of the Dragonhide treasure maps is worth it. In fact, it's far more than that. Emperor Song sighed with melancholy. Now that the continent's struggle for hegemony has basically come to an end, Yutong's dominance is already a foregone conclusion. As long as we annex the other countries according to the sequence, we can completely unify the continent and pacify Tianxian. If there is any force in this world that can interfere with, or even reverse this trend at this critical moment, it can only be the forces of the Jianghu. Whether it is to assassinate a general amidst an army of 10,000, or to gather a large number of powerful men to face them head-on, the people of the martial world are an unstable factor for Yutong to unify the world. Do you know what kind of benefits the other empires other than Yutong can offer in exchange for the intervention of the martial world forces when it comes to a critical juncture? For a country that was about to perish, what price couldn't they pay? On the other hand, No matter how amazing a person is, there will always be a price that can be bought. At the last moment, the higher-ups of the various countries will definitely think of this method to reverse the situation. And before the war to unify the world begins, I'll first stir up a calamity in the world of martial artists that is sufficiently shocking, enticing, and influential. I'll use it to greatly injure the martial artists. It might be a little cruel, but it's a great move. Yun Yang's initial plan was to eliminate the biggest threat, the assassin organization that only cared about money and not people. It was even better. More than 100,000 famous assassins were destroyed in a day. It could be said that half of the threat from the martial world forces had been removed. Assassins have always been the greatest taboo in an army of 10,000. Up until today, the martial world's people are still fighting one another. The more they fight, the more their strength is damaged. Then, they will have less and less ability to participate in the war to unify the world. I think that when this calamity ends and the whereabouts of the 2 Dragonhide treasure maps are completely unknown, the survivors will not only have to worry about their enemies coming for revenge, but they will also have to spend a lot of energy to settle down their families, heal their wounds, and improve their skills. I'm afraid they won't have the mood to participate in the war to unify the world. Other than that, there's another advantage to Yun Yang's plan. After the battle in Tiantang City, the entire martial world will owe Yutong officials a favor. As long as this favor remains, when the martial world's calamity ends, Yutong will be able to arrange the follow-up and come up with any corresponding strategies without worrying about interference from the martial world forces. This is a calamity that has the martial world's forces down to their very bones. Whether it's the start, the reason, the juncture, the time, or even the diversion of the calamity and the diversion of the tiger from the mountain, everything has been arranged perfectly and seamlessly. Emperor Song heaved a long sigh. Young Master Yun Yang is indeed a genius of his generation. He has foresight and is meticulous at every step. I'm not nearly as good as he is. First Court King Qingguang could not help feeling dissatisfied and confused by Emperor Song's words. He said, "Everyone knows that young Master Yin has a good mind. But he can't be as good as you say, can he? Your brain is widely acknowledged as the best among us brothers. If you're not nearly as good as him, wouldn't we not dare to talk to him?" Emperor Song glanced at his brother mockingly and said, "Have you forgotten who Yin Yang is? Other than being Supreme Cloud, he's also Supreme Wit, the Supreme Wit of the 9 Supremes. Do you know how he grasped the opportunity in this situation? How much benefit has Yutong gained from this incident? You can't even think about it, yet you're still trying to compare yourself to him. You're right about one thing. All of you should really talk to him less in the future, or else you'll have to bargain for him on your own accord when he buys all of you over." The other kings were puzzled. "Oh well, third, we all know that we're not as good as you. Can you please explain in detail? Is that Supreme Cloud really as sharp as you've said?" Emperor Song snorted and rolled his eyes, saying, "Let's start from the beginning. Actually, from the moment Dong Tianling revealed this, I've already told all of you that this was 99% of Yin Yang's setup and manipulation. It's just that even I didn't see it too far back then. At most, it was because of the importance of the Dragonhide treasure map that I connected it to Yin Yang's plot. What he's plotting is not trivial. It's only now that I've come to this that I can fully understand the whole story. The starting point of Yin Yang's plot was to borrow Dong Tianling's hand, using his popinjay appearance to toss out the Dragonhide treasure map flawlessly. The 4 popinjays completed this foreplay with their exquisite performance and stayed out of the matter as victims. This is also the fundamental reason why the 4 young masters who started it all remained unscathed when the entire martial world was torn apart, with ghosts weeping and deities grieving. It's always been said that the best liar can win people's trust with 9 truths and 1 lie. However, Yin Yang's plot can be seen through at a glance. But can you not jump into it? That's the 17th master of the Abyss's legacy map. Don't you think it's amazing just because of this? Can you take it if it were you? Chapter 725. Where have those pinnacle experts gone? Are they really not tempted by the 17th master of the Abyss's legacy? The answer is obviously no. Needless to say, Everyone knows the names, Duga Chou, Ling Xiaozui, Mr. Nian, and the other experts of the Four Seasons Tower. Of course, there's also Jun Moyen and our old master. Even so, there shouldn't be more than 10 people. Is there any objection to this number? Logically speaking, there's a high chance that all of these people will show up. Then, one of them will seize the opportunity and take the secret map. Those who act later will sigh at their bad luck and lose the treasure. But they won't make a move to fight to the death. In short, as long as a peerless person appears in this fight would have ended a long time ago. However, in reality, none of them have appeared. Here comes the question, why haven't any of these people appeared? It's obviously a rare treasure that's tempting enough. Actually, the reason is simple. Ling Xiaozui, Duga Chou, and the rest left the residence of Yin not long ago. Their target was Mr. Nian. If I'm not mistaken, there's a high chance that those pinnacle experts are restraining each other now. They don't have extra energy or time to come here. They might not even know that the martial world is already in such a state. There's no one who can make the final decision. Everyone can see this, so the opportunity has appeared. To these people now, this is an opportunity that belongs to everyone. Without pinnacle experts, such an opportunity is hard to come by. Too many people are overconfident, thinking that they're the destined owner of the treasure map. Naturally, they swarm forward together, forming the most formidable force. Then, they make use of the personal intentions of this force to limit this battle to Tiantang City. Is this timing accurate? Why didn't Ling Xiaozui and the other pinnacle experts appear? How would the ordinary martial world people think about the specific reason? They only know that this is an opportunity, so they go forward with all their might. That's why the stalemate is here. Everyone shares the same thought. This further facilitates Yin Yang's plan, gathering all the hidden threats of the martial world that could affect Yutong's unification of the world, thus eliminating them in one fell swoop. Doesn't Yun Yang know that those assassins were hired by the crown prince and the princes? Targeted at him? He knew it better than anyone else. However, he kept delaying and didn't fight them head-on. He kept maintaining the unhurried situation, making it difficult for the assassins to take advantage of him. In the end, he was able to deal with them in one fell swoop when the incident broke out. Then, with the military's assassination of the assassins, the plot continued, and the crown prince was dragged down from his throne, further worsening Yutong's internal threat. And this time, we're directly solving the national crisis. Not to mention, he even schemed to kill his greatest personal enemy, Ouyang Shaoxi, in this incident. He has laid out layers upon layers of schemes, and every step he takes is alarming. From what I can see, Yun Yang has considered every aspect when he set up this game. He has grasped every possible change within his grasp. Even our concourse of the underworld is within his plans. Why are we within his plans too? What does this mean? Could he have schemed against us? We're allies with him. If he schemed against us, it would be his fault. The hot-tempered king of Chakravarti grumbled. Sigh, honestly, Yun Yang can't be blamed for this scheme. We're considered an unexpected variable in this battle. But it's also the biggest variable. Because we're strong enough, the chances of us obtaining the Dragonhide treasure map will be difficult to match once we join forces. Of course, the most important thing is that we don't care about the Dragonhide treasure map. Even if we have the chance to obtain it, we'll still hand it over to Yun Yang eventually. There's a high chance that Yun Yang has considered and arranged this from the beginning. Otherwise, why would he promise us a chance to leap forward when the matter is over? This proves that he has long discovered a place similar to a Yin-Chi palace, a place with unusually dense Yin-Chi. He has indeed chosen the most suitable time to release us. He has allowed us to do the dirty work and attract all the subsequent attention. But there's only admiration, and not the slightest bit of hatred. Furthermore, we can continue to work together in the future, and our relationship might even grow closer. Because we each take what we need, the benefits are great. Emperor Song chuckled. Looking at it now, can you all see it? Now the martial world is at peace, the imperial court is stable, there's nothing to worry about, the military and government are united. There are no traitors within, no strong enemies outside. The army is strong, the steeds are strong, and the generals are as numerous as the clouds. In addition, even the hidden threat of the fight for the throne has been eliminated. If Yutong still can't unify Tianxian, it'll be the strangest thing in the world. Come to think of it, the price that young Master Yun paid for this setup was ultimately those 2 maps. Moreover, he had taken a stroll in the martial world and returned them to his hands unscathed in the end. It was truly a great profit without any capital. Such calculation, such strategy, to have all the heroes in the world in the palm of his hand, how terrifying is that? Emperor Song let out a heartfelt sigh of admiration. King Qingguang shook his head and said, "Admire later. How can you be sure that these 2 maps were taken by young Master Yin? Also, how can you tell that we'll definitely be able to take these 2 maps back?" Emperor Song looked at his brother like he was looking at an idiot. The other kings also looked at him like they were looking at an idiot. They sighed at the same time. I have nothing to say to someone with your level of IQ. The average IQ of the Yama kings of the 10 halls was pulled down by someone. The one who said this was the king of equality. His face was filled with a sense of superiority. There's no doubt about this. My foolish brother, stop asking questions, it's embarrassing. King Chujiang sighed. What are the kings of the concourse of the underworld best at? It's none other than concealing our tracks. This fight is finally coming to an end. As long as no powerful figure appears, this treasure map will be ours for sure. Everything is just waiting for us to enter the battle. I can say with certainty that those who can make the final decision are now restrained by each other and are destined to miss this battle. There's no doubt about it. Emperor Song said decisively. We'll make our move tomorrow and take the treasure map back. We'll end this scheme once and for all. The others nodded in agreement. They all looked impatient. Yun Yang was in a hurry to retrieve the treasure map, but they were also in a hurry to improve their abilities. First Court King Qingguang scratched his head and said, I see. He was also in a hurry to retrieve the treasure map and obtain the opportunity to improve his ability that Yun Yang had promised. As he thought about it, he understood what was meant by no doubt. He was already in such a hurry. What else could he do? Although Yun Yang had put it nicely, the item was in his hands. If he said he would not give it to him, what could he do? If he could not retrieve the treasure map, why would he need the opportunity Yun Yang had given him? This was a simple and obvious matter that would benefit both parties. At this moment, the few fellows who could make the final decision that Emperor Song had mentioned were in a sorry state, but they were indeed destined to miss this battle. Yun Yang's calculations were correct. Chapter 726. Now Ling Xiaozui and Duge Chou, the 2 bosses, were truly frustrated. Logically, based on their own judgment, the combination of the 4 of them was already the strongest team in the world. Be it in terms of wits or strength, they were invincible, let alone someone who dared to cause them trouble. Their team consisted of the current unrivaled expert, Ling Xiaozui, the former unrivaled expert Duge Chou, Heaven's Inquisition, who knew yin and yang and could predict the future, and the weakest of them all was the legendary god of wine, an unparalleled expert with a pinnacle cultivation base, Feng Xiang'e. Whether it was in theory or in reality, the team of these 4 people could be said to be invincible anywhere in this world. In spite of this, the reality was that their journey had not been peaceful at all. After a period of recuperation, the 4 of them, who had recovered from their injuries, walked out of the mountain. Feng Xiang'e expressed his indignation and suggested to find a way to cause trouble for the 4 Seasons Tower again, to catch them off guard. No matter how bad the outcome of the previous battle had been, it was confirmed that the 4 Seasons Tower's headquarters was in the mountain. Now that everyone had recovered from their injuries, why not return the favor? The reason they had been tricked the last time was because they had not been aware of the ambush. Now that everyone was on guard, how could they be ambushed again? When he made his move this time, he was planning to catch the enemy off guard. He should have succeeded in one strike, and it was flawless. Ling Xiaozui and Duge Chou thought that Feng Xiang'e's suggestion was reasonable. In particular, Ling Xiaozui had another concern in his heart. Honestly speaking, it was the most appropriate thing for them to go back. and look for Yun Yang to discuss their next move. However, based on the various assessments, there had to be a problem among the four of them. If they could not find this person and brought him back hastily, it might lead to a greater disaster. On the other hand, if they were to attack the Four Seasons Tower again, regardless of whether there was a trap or an ambush, they would be more certain of their own people after experiencing it. It was better to clear their surroundings and return only after they had come to a conclusion, in order to avoid any lurking dangers. If he and Duga Cho, two top-notch experts, had actually done something that they were unaware of, they would become the biggest joke in the martial world. Not only would they be a laughingstock, they would be shameful for all eternity. But at the end of the day, they couldn't afford to lose. There was something wrong with his mentality. The more he couldn't afford to offend these four people, the more he didn't want to be at a disadvantage. Why? I'm so awesome, but I'm losing here. Thus, in the end, the three of them agreed to this suggestion. Gu Chaoyang, on the other hand, was the only one who objected to the suggestion firmly. He declared, "This trip is fraught with danger. Not only is there a bloodbath, but there's also the danger of a trapped dragon. Repent and you'll be saved. You'll lose if you advance rashly." It was an unprecedentedly firm objection. However, Duga Cho was already suspicious of him. Why would he listen to him? At the same time, Ling Xiaozui wanted to confirm something as well. In addition to Feng Xiang's incitement, there was no way Gu Chaoyang could overturn the idea of a counterattack, no matter how insistent he was. If he said a few more words now, the four of them might start fighting on the spot, and he would be the target of all. The other three would definitely attack him together, and the only result would be him being beaten flat. That would be a great injustice. He had no choice but to reluctantly agree. Therefore, on the same night, the four of them crept up the target mountain again to explore the Four Seasons Tower. The mountain where the Four Seasons Tower's headquarters was located was extremely steep. The highest point of the main peak in the middle was so high that it reached the sky. A conservative estimate would be about 10,000 feet tall, surrounded by cliffs. The entire peak was like a brush holder. In fact, the peak's name was Brush Holder Peak. Feng Xiang pointed at the Brush Holder Peak from afar, and explained rather proudly, "See that? Only when you enter this area can you see this mountain that's like a brush holder. The last time we were ambushed, it was in the wide area under the brush holder. This time, we've crept up the Brush Holder Peak, coming out of the blue, and taking their headquarters by surprise. Even if they're on guard, will they be able to defend themselves against this?" Feng Xiang's plan could be said to be extremely bold, but it had its own unique and unexpected aspects. Ling Xiaozui and Duga Cho pondered for a moment, feeling that the plan was feasible and had a high success rate. No matter what, with the combined combat power of the four of them, even if there were any accidents, it would be difficult to stop them if they only wanted to flee when things went south. No matter how strong the other party was, it would not be difficult for them to retreat unscathed. "I'm already half a step into my coffin. I don't want to leave an obsession in my heart that will linger in my death." Ling Xiaozui and Duga Cho nodded in agreement to Feng Xiang's words. Gu Chaoyang's opinion, the only one who disagreed, was meaningless. In spite of this, Gu Chaoyang still insisted on one condition. It was fine to go up and fight. However, they had to plan out their strategy and retreat beforehand. Not to mention anything else, Brush Holder Peak was easy to defend and difficult to attack. Although everyone's skills were superb, and they would not be bothered by the hindrance, there was still a limit to one's strength. The martial world had countless tricks up its sleeves, and it was impossible to guard against them. Therefore, there had to be a certain level of safety measures. For example, it was not enough to prepare healing medicine. They could hide it in their mouths and swallow it when they needed it. Based on the terrain, they could make a few kites that could glide high up in the sky just in case. Could they guarantee that they would not fall into some kind of trap that prevented them from gathering mystical qi? In addition, their bodies had to be prepared as well. As for the antidote, they might as well consume it beforehand to defend against poison. If there was nothing else, they could just treat it as medicine. It was better to be prepared and avoid the risk. Gu Chaoyang's series of requests annoyed Duga Cho to no end. But Gu Chaoyang was insistent on it. My request is the biggest consideration for the implementation of safety. It's for everyone's good. If you have any objections, why don't you do as I say? All right, then forgive me for not accompanying you. The three of you can go play yourselves. The three of them thought about it, and realized that Gu Chaoyang was indeed doing it out of kindness. The capability that the Four Seasons Tower had displayed earlier was indeed astounding, far above their own. It was not excessive to be cautious, so they did as they were told. Then the four of them charged forward. However, what they did not expect was that they were ambushed once again as they charged forward. When the four of them set foot on Brushholder Peak, their powerful deific consciousness quickly realized that there was no one on the peak. When they carefully snuck into the Four Seasons Tower's headquarters, there was still no sign of anyone in the only building on the peak. How could the four of them not know that something was amiss when they saw the situation? They wanted to pull themselves away, but it was too late. A super explosion that they had never seen before erupted. With a loud boom, the entire towering peak that was tens of thousands of feet tall turned into rubble and debris in an instant. The Four Seasons Tower had buried an unknown amount of explosives under Brushholder Peak. They were detonated at the right time, resulting in such an earth-shattering explosion. Today is the last night watch. Tomorrow, I'll go to Jinan for a meeting. During this period of time, the incident was only one of the aspects. Actually, I've been thinking about something. The plot in Tianxian continent had basically ended, and we were about to enter the Bound of Universe. The Bound of Universe was the last segment of the book. The setting and plot needed to be considered. However, this was not the main reason. The main reason was that the intention was wrong. Before writing this book, the intention was to create the country and the world. Then the more he wrote, the more confused he became. He had put in 1,000 times the effort to write, only to realize that there were two extremes, those that he liked, and those that he loved to death. Those that he did not like, he would not even look at. Chapter 727. It was fortunate that Gu Chaoyang had vetoed Feng Xiang's suggestion to split up when they were ascending the peak. The four of them were gathered in one spot. The highest point of the peak was near, and the explosion was triggered from below. The moment the explosion detonated, the four of them had already flown up to avoid the direct impact of the explosion. Otherwise, despite their profound cultivation base and strong cultivation base, they would have perished here and gone to the underworld together. However, even if the four of them reacted quickly and avoided the direct impact of the huge explosion, the four of them who had to bear the impact of the aftermath of the violent explosion couldn't help but be seriously injured. The four experts hadn't even exchanged blows with the enemy, but their combat strength had already been depleted, and their condition was greatly ruined. The force of the explosion that could destroy an entire mountain in an instant was enough to annihilate any expert in this world. Even those as strong as Ling Xiaozui and Duga Chou were no exception. After a while, the shockwave from the core of the explosion gradually subsided, but the rumbling continued to resound. Many peaks were still shaking and collapsing from the aftershock. The accumulated snow on the mountain peaks, that had not melted for tens of thousands of years, had fallen from the clouds, turning into a massive avalanche that should never have appeared. The mountains and plains were covered with ditches and rivers. For a time, there was no other sound between heaven and earth, apart from the loud rumbling sounds. After a long time, the land that had been bustling for a long time finally began to calm down. However, the surrounding peaks that had radiated out were still trembling incessantly. Amidst the white snow, there was a sudden explosion. A silhouette in green shot out from within. It was Ling Xiaozui. Ling Xiaozui was indeed the unrivaled expert in the world. He could still maintain his composure even in the face of such a terrible situation, waiting for a chance to escape. It was impressive indeed. However, he was not in a good state right now. At least, his external appearance was not optimistic. He was limping, his green robe stained with blood, and there was a large dark stain on his chest. It was the blood he had spat out from the intense tremor. His face was bruised and his hair was messy. His eyes were filled with rage. As soon as he came out, he didn't dare to be careless. He immediately looked around to make sure his surroundings were safe. Then he took a deep breath and began to circulate his energy. After a while, he spat out a mouthful of blood. His complexion recovered a bit, and then he let out a long sigh. His combat strength compared to normal was only 10% to 20%. In other words, this was the most dangerous moment in Ling Xiaozui's life. Ling Xiaozui forced himself to calm down and began to search for traces of the other three. Trapped in such a powerful explosion, would they still have a chance to survive? Just then, there was another sound in the snow. It was Duga Chao's head popping out before he leaped out of the snow. Duga Chao's condition was similar to Ling Xiaozui's. He was panting heavily and vomiting blood. Suddenly, he shook his head and moaned in agony, closing his eyes and opening them again. Only then did he focus his gaze on Ling Xiaozui. How are you feeling now? What about the other two? Ling Xiaozui shook his head and said while panting, Not yet. They might be buried underneath, but we might have to recuperate first before we can talk about finding them. Ling Xiaozui could already see that Duga Chao's condition was no better than his own. His cultivation base had dropped to 80 to 90%. If he were to search for them directly, he might die of exhaustion before he could find them. Duga Chao chuckled and said self-deprecatingly, It's all thanks to Gu Chaoyang this time. The bloody disaster he spoke of actually came true. This old man was forced by him to wear the ice silkworm robe and put on an additional layer of flood dragon's skin to protect my heart. I've also swallowed a few spiritual pills early on. All of them have been extremely effective. Otherwise, even if I had the mystical beast skin kite as support to charge out when the explosion came, I might still have been injured and exhausted. Now that I think about it, if it wasn't for his insistent reminder, I might really have died here this time. Ling Xiaozui chuckled bitterly as well. My situation is similar. It's just that I've lost one of my legs to the boulders. Sigh. The two peerless experts exchanged a bitter smile. A broken leg from a boulder would have been understandable if it had happened to an ordinary person. But it was a joke when it happened to Ling Xiaozui. Ling Xiaozui's leg would probably not even budge, even if an expert were to smash it with a sledgehammer. Now, however, it had been broken by the boulder. Since the other party can predict the timing of our attack so precisely, I don't think there's much time left for us. We must recover immediately and try to find the both of them. I think the Four Seasons Tower's men will be here to search for them in less than a quarter of an hour. That's right, that's right. After a short moment, the two of them recovered slightly, and then they started the search and rescue work. Although the two of them were injured and exhausted, the damage to their divine sense wasn't serious. Once their powerful divine sense spread out, it instantly enveloped an area of 50 kilometers, and they quickly discovered two weak auras of life. You take the left, I'll take the right. Get away quickly after we save them. Upon Ling Xiaozui's command, both of them sprang into action without another word. By the time Ling Xiaozui had dug Gu Chaoyang out from the pile of boulders that was 1,000 feet underground, Duga Chao had just dug Feng Xiang'a out as well. Both of them still have a breath left in them. Ling Xiaozui grinned. Gu Chaoyang's internal organs are damaged, his internal organs are fried. There are 7 to 8 holes in his head alone. He's dying from his injuries. Duga Chao coughed and said, Feng Xiang'a is about the same. His last bit of inner breath is faintly discernible. Both of them are at the gates of the King of Hell, just one last step away. Let's go. It's more important to leave this place as soon as possible. Ling Xiaozui flew up first while Duga Chao followed closely behind, sprinting at full speed. Although both of them were moving fast, their speed had slowed down a few times compared to before. A few silhouettes were already whistling and flying over from a distance away. Kill Ling Xiaozui and capture Duga Chao alive. Let's go. The two unrivaled experts could not help feeling aggrieved. They had never been so aggrieved in their entire lives. Now they had been aggrieved twice in 4 days. The second time, in particular, was like a dragon trapped in a shallow pond, a tiger out of the plains. Looking from afar, one could see the bigger picture from the slightest clue. The newcomer's abilities were not to be underestimated, but they might not have been able to catch their attention. At least, they did not have to be chased by others. They had never been so flustered before. As they ran, the two of them could not help but think of a saying: busy like stray dogs, anxious like fish that had escaped the net. They could not help sighing. Chapter 728. Both of them panted as they sprinted, using the mystical chi that they had just recovered to get rid of the smell of the explosion and the stench of blood on them. Both of them knew that although they were slower now, they were a step ahead after all. As long as they avoided them appropriately, they were confident that they could shake off their pursuers. However, the fatal problem now was the aura that their pursuers had sensed. If they did not get rid of these auras, they would die today. After a long while, whether it was a coincidence or not, whether it was by chance or by necessity, both of them arrived at the edge of the cliff and jumped off without hesitation. Was this an accident or not? While jumping, the two of them instinctively felt a strange feeling of not knowing whether to laugh or cry. F***ck, who the hell was their father? Was he the unrivaled expert who was sought after by others, or a young man who had just come out of the martial world? He had been chased to jump off a cliff twice in just 4 days. Don't novels always say that cliffs are places of opportunity? Does this also apply to us now? What was different from the previous time was that the Four Seasons Tower's men did not retreat this time. Instead, they launched an unusually strict search, looking like they were going to kill all 4 of them. Below them, Ling Xiaozui and Dugacho finally found a hidden spot after much effort. Then Ling Xiaozui dragged his broken leg and began to set up illusory formations. After setting up 3 illusory formations consecutively, both of them brought Feng Xiang'e and Gu Chaoyang along and found a more secluded corner. They dug a hole on the flat ground and lifted up the surface above. The 4 of them went in to hide and moved the surface back to its original position. Not long after the 4 of them had hidden themselves, they heard swishing sounds coming from outside. The pursuers had arrived. There's something wrong with the terrain here. There's a formation. Break the formation. There's no one. So it's to confuse us. The formation is set up to confuse us. Search again. There's another formation here. Look, there's no one in the formation. It's also to confuse us. This is the 3rd formation. Yes, the unrivaled expert is indeed the unrivaled expert. The 3 illusory formations have taken us an hour. With their speed, they probably won't be able to catch up. Let's go back. Brothers, gather up and listen to the boss's command. This time, I can't let those 2 get away no matter what. When I catch up to them, I'll **ck them up. Ling Xiaozui and Ling Xiaozui laid there quietly, their breathing paused, only exhaling once in a while. Ling Xiaozui's hand was still pressed against Gu Chaoyang's back, channeling mystical qi continuously to prolong Gu Chaoyang's life. It was the same for Dugacho. Even though they heard that there were no longer any movements outside, the 2 of them still did not move. They remained motionless for an entire day and night before they carefully climbed out with their men. We can't go on like this. We have to find a safe place to save them. They won't be able to hold on much longer. Another day later, Gu Chaoyang, who had been treated, slowly woke up. Just as he opened his eyes, he saw 2 faces above his head, watching him open his eyes with awkward smiles written all over them. Sigh, Gu Chaoyang rolled his eyes. Before he could even circulate his energy to recuperate, he began to complain directly. What did I say? Something was wrong, wasn't it? There was a bloodbath, wasn't there? Some of them refused to listen. What happened in the end? Ling Xiaozui and Dugacho coughed continuously, trying to cover up their awkwardness, but they could not hide it at all. Where's Feng Xiang'e? Gu Chaoyang shifted his focus immediately. Now that the 4 of them had been ambushed and severely injured, it was a foregone conclusion that their capabilities would be depleted. The urgent matter at hand was to ascertain the uncertain factors. Was Feng Xiang'e the traitor? If he was, he should have taken action by now, right? The further question was, how could the 3 of them escape the conspirators' plot, given their current condition? Feng Xiang'e's condition isn't good. He's worse than you. Dugachao's face was dark. You've regained consciousness now, at least, and can circulate your energy to heal yourself. Only his chest is rising and falling slightly, and there's still some warmth. The rest of him is cold. How could this be? Gu Chaoyang was shocked when he heard that. He lifted his head abruptly, wanting to sit up, but his reckless movement had already affected his wounds. His head felt like it was being hammered by 800 men in a frenzy. He moaned at once. "Ayo, this is really strong. Let's rest here for now. It's impossible for us to leave now." Ling Xiaozui sighed. "We'll need at least half a month to recover from our injuries. We mustn't act recklessly in this half a month. Death awaits us if we go out." Gu Chaoyang rolled his eyes and said, "I've told you that there's a bloodbath ahead, and I've also said that there's the danger of being trapped. You didn't believe me, did you? Do you believe me now?" The old man who had the upper hand began to grumble and complain incessantly. Ling Xiaozui and Dugucho knew that they were in the wrong, so they ignored him. After some time, Ling Xiaozui forced Gu Chaoyang to take another wave of medicine and slapped the back of his neck, stopping the fellow's incessant chatter and causing him to fall back into slumber. Fortunately, the fellow's cultivation method had recovered its self-defense ability, allowing him to circulate his energy to heal himself. There's still something odd about this. There are many things that don't make sense. Ling Xiaozui told Dugucho, looking at the two unconscious fellows. Dugucho scratched his head as well. "Yes, it's really odd." Both of them frowned. Although they had been ambushed and were severely injured during the risky attack, they had eliminated the suspicion of Gu Chaoyang and Feng Xiang'a. Gu Chaoyang, who was the most suspicious, had risked falling out to propose a safety measure. It was a prerequisite to save everyone's lives. As for Feng Xiang'a, his injuries were too severe, so severe that it was still uncertain whether he could survive. If he were a spy, would he have to risk his life and play it so realistically? However, why would the Four Seasons Tower see through the enemy's plan and bury so many explosives? Could it be that they had been prepared and were only waiting for the moment the Almighty to strike? This explosion was simply too vicious. Both of them exchanged glances. While there was still a lingering fear in their hearts, they also felt that it was extremely odd and difficult to sort out their thoughts. "Dugu, don't you think that our escape this time is still very easy? That we're very lucky? We fought the last time, but this time we didn't even have a chance to meet," Ling Xiaozui said telepathically. Dugucho nodded slowly as well. "I'm thinking about this as well. According to the situation just now, if the Four Seasons Tower had really seen through the enemy's plan and set it up specifically for us, it's entirely possible that they could have used this explosion to bury us there. However, the men that they've arranged seem to be a little too far away, giving us too much time to react. This is indeed unusual." Ling Xiaozui nodded. According to Mr. Nian's intelligence, since he had predicted our second attack, such a mistake shouldn't have happened. In particular, it shouldn't have happened both times. Therefore, there must be a reason for this, a purpose. Dugucho's expression was dark. But what we're most passive about now is that we don't know what the other party's purpose is. Chapter 729. Ling Xiaozui sighed. This matter was a huge headache for the two experts. After a few attempts, nothing was found. They could only confirm that the other party had other motives. What was it? They were clueless. Everything was the same as before they came into contact with the Four Seasons Tower. Ling Xiaozui sighed and said, "When we recover in a few days, one of us will stay behind while the other goes in alone to investigate. The enemy is out in the open while we're in the dark. We have to find a way to improve the situation." Dugucho did not speak, only nodding slowly. Ling Xiaozui said, "The Four Seasons Tower's arrangement is completely illogical, but there's a terrifying motive hidden within this illogic. I'm afraid this is related to something even greater." Dugucho lifted his head slowly, his eyes gleaming with a sharp sword intent as he uttered word by word. "No matter what the motive is, they won't succeed." Compared to Ling Xiaozui and the others who were in dire straits, the Empire of Yutong had nothing to worry about now. The internal and external troubles were all gone, and the situation was unprecedented. The four boarders were well trained and had a high morale. They trained their troops continuously and looked intimidating. Fang Qingtian was no longer weak, But he was in high spirits as if he had been reborn. Staying in the board of military every day, he did not speak or move, but it was enough to pacify the people. Qiu Jianhan and Leng Douyin were both energetic and physically fit, but they were old and could no longer rely on their muscles and bones. After Yin Yang's cheat, their bodies seemed to be rejuvenated despite their age, as if they were a dozen years younger. Their energy was unprecedentedly exuberant, to the point of eagerness. They had requested to head to the front line a few times to swap the two marshals back, so that the two old men could have a second spring and write a new legend in the history of the war. In spite of this, Yutong, from the emperor himself down, be it the military or political parties, were all speechless, unable to respond for a long time. What are you two old things up to? Do you know what you two are talking about? What do you want? If you two are so capable, why don't you just go to heaven? Yutong had Tai Zheng in the north, Leng Shan in the south, Fu Baogua in the east, and Wang Yunju in the west. Each one of them was a veteran marshal, including Sun Zihu and the others. They were all capable generals who could take charge. Every one of their subordinates was a warrior who had been through hundreds of battles, an elite troop. However, the more elite the army was, the more it meant that these people had their own personalities, and the harder it was to control them. They only believed in their superiors. Logically speaking, with the western border as an example, Sun Zihu would only listen to Wang Yunju. If Leng Douyin and Wang Yunju's orders were to go against each other, there was a 99% chance that Sun Zihu would follow Wang Yunju. Come to think of it, there would not be any slip-ups if the two old men really went over. It was the same Western Front, but as long as it was Qiu Jianhan who went over, Wang Yunju, who was his disciple, would not say a word. Perhaps he would even cry and shout, "Come, come, come, come." Similarly, if Leng Douyin were to go to the southern border, there would be no problem. The reason was simpler and more brutal. The current marshal of the southern border, Leng Shan, was his son. Leng Shan's position as the marshal of the southern border was actually inherited from his father. But the problem was, you two old fogies with white hair and beards, who looked like they had one foot in the grave and were half dead just yesterday, actually wanted to play again. What were you playing? Playing cool? To be honest, Leng Douyin, who was 5 to 6 years younger than Qiu Jianhan, really wanted to go out and take charge of the southern border. Fang Qingtian's health had been poor these few years, so it was difficult for him to have much energy to deal with the military. Once the war broke out, Leng Douyin had been stationed at the Board of War. He was so bored that he was itching to go. The marshal of the southern border, Leng Shan, was the best at defense among Yutong's 4 marshals. His defensive skills were unparalleled in the world, but his military strategy was still lacking. Now that Yutong's internal worries were gone, and with the momentum of breaking the four-nation siege, the border defense was showing signs of change. Leng Douyin going to the southern border could make up for the lack of offensive strength in the southern border. In spite of this, Qiu Jianhan's plan was only to avoid His Majesty's questioning. Now the emperor had to ask old Qiu every day, "What did Supreme Cloud say? Did you manage to contact Supreme Cloud? Who is Supreme Cloud?" Qiu Jianhan was miserable, racking his brains for a solution. Suddenly an idea struck him. "I can't afford to offend you, but I can't avoid you. I'll go to the front line and stay far away from you, all right? I'll go to the western border and see Wang Yunju, to see how impressive the western elite troops he boasted about were, to see if they really had the elegance of his father's successor. I want to see if there are any good seedlings there, especially since I have the ultimate art of war waiting to be passed down." No matter how wonderful the idea was, it had to be realized. How could the front line be so easy to go to? His Majesty was adamant in his disagreement. You want to go to the front line? You want to be treated and flattered by your disciples and grand disciples? You want to be far away from the emperor? You don't look that good, but you're dreaming. You must stay in the capital until I find out about Supreme Cloud. Qiu Jianhan could not extricate himself no matter what he did, so he said angrily, "If I can't go then, Leng Douyin can't go either. Otherwise, this old man won't feel fair." His Majesty played right into his hands. He pointed at old Qiu's nose and hollered, "You two old bastards can't go anywhere. You're already so old. If anything happens to you, I won't be able to stop both of your families from crying." Truth be told, the last time Qiu Jianhan was in danger, His Majesty's heart ached. Therefore, Lung Doyin was cooped up at home. When Lung Doyin found out about this, he was so furious that he almost spat blood. He went around looking for Qiu Jianhan to pick a fight, but the latter avoided him, wholeheartedly looking for a disciple for Wu Ying. On one hand, Lung Doyin knew that he was in the wrong, so he hid far away. On the other hand, this matter was listed as Yutong's top secret by Qiu, Lung Feng, Tai Shengguan, and the others. It was also a pressing matter. The level of secrecy was even vaguely higher than that of the 9 Supremes. There was no harm without comparison. The 9 Supremes were still irreplaceable to Yutong. But the legend of the 9 Supremes was too lofty, unreachable, and elusive. Wu Ying's disciple, on the other hand, was something that could actually be done. As the few of them studied Wu Ying's works in detail, they were even more certain of Wu Ying's talent. If they could be under his tutelage, they would not have to worry about not being able to learn much. The few of them were smart people. They understood that this was a good opportunity. They wanted to use this opportunity to pick someone from their families to become Wu Ying's official disciple. However, after a few batches of them were sent over, they were all rejected by Wu Ying. They don't meet the requirements. Watching the young talents of their families being eliminated one after another, the few elders felt their stomachs clenched. Our children are all outstanding. If you're not satisfied with this, what else do you want? What are you playing at? After a few days of selection, Wu Ying had only chosen one person from the Qiu family's candidates. This person was only a peripheral descendant of the Qiu family, not a direct descendant of the family. He did not fancy any of the others. Lung Doyin was infuriated by this. He was so furious that he almost sent a letter to summon his eldest son, the Empire's Southern Marshal, Lung Shan, back to participate in the selection. However, in the next round of selection, the son of the Board of Punishments Minister Wu Lai was chosen. Chapter 730. It was common knowledge that Wu Lai's son had no cultivation base. His legs were crippled, and he had even lost his sight for a long period of time. It was only because someone had saved him that he had regained what he had lost, and was able to see again. Aside from all these, there was another impression that this child had given others. His mind did not seem to be in a clear state, a little like dementia. What could a person like this do even if he had recovered to his normal state? How could such a person win Wu Ying's favor? Perhaps, what was Wu Ying's standard to gain favor? My standard of choosing a disciple is one's temperament, talent and aptitude are secondary. Wu Lai's son is not old, but he has experienced far more than an ordinary person. His mind has been tempered to an indomitable state. He has no cultivation base and his physique is not suitable for cultivation, but it does not hinder my inheritance. It only needs to strengthen his body. However, this child's level of concentration is not something that most people in this world can achieve. It is the most commendable trait. Wu Ying said. Furthermore, it is due to his family's upbringing and the temperament that has been passed down that he will never feel guilty in this life. Those who can keep their hearts as clear as a mirror and have a clear conscience are already the first choice of a civil official. The few elders were speechless when they heard this. At this point, Wu Ying had already chosen his 2 main disciples, a scholar and a martial one. What was left was probably to urge his 2 disciples to work harder and take in a few more registered disciples to accompany them in their studies. Wu Lai was pleasantly surprised that his son had been chosen. He was so surprised that he lost his composure, personally thanking Wu Ying, which was rare. It was also the first time in his life that he had ever given someone a gift, a piece of calligraphy that he had written himself, in broad daylight. Qiu Jianhan and the others scoffed at the gift, utterly disdainful. It was true that Wu Lai was an upright official and a capable official, but those 2 strokes of calligraphy were only passable. A gift to thank his master should be more solemn and more precious. You might as well not give this gift at all. Unexpectedly, Wu Ying seemed to have received the greatest compliment from Wu Lai's gift. He was so excited that he hung the calligraphy up carefully and hung it high in the main hall. Could it be that Wu Ying liked this thing? The big shots were overjoyed. In a few days, they collected a lot of calligraphy and paintings from famous people and sent them to the teacher, hoping that the teacher would accept 2 more students for the sake of everyone's good intentions, and that the calligraphy and paintings were very precious. 2 sheep to let go, and a few more sheep to drive. Then a few days later he was told the bad news. Teacher Wu is boiling water with fire. The calligraphy and paintings that were sent over are used to start the fire. It will last for a while. The few big shots were speechless and stunned on the spot. What are you doing? What was he doing? You liked a few words written by a certain someone. We really thought that you liked this thing. So we sent you the famous calligraphy and paintings. They are all truly rare treasures. Saying that each word is worth 1,000 gold is the most modest way of saying it. How could Wu Lai's 2 strokes of calligraphy compare to it? They are completely incomparable. Even if you don't say that it is a precious collection, you can't use it to start a fire. What a lunatic! How could they know that Wu Ying was even more restrained towards materialistic desires because of his stain? Wu Lai was known as the Iron Sky, the most righteous person in the Empire of Yutong. His gift of the Iron Sky in broad daylight meant a lot to Wu Ying. It was a huge acknowledgement. That was why he accepted it, and was even more ecstatic because it was a gift from Wu Lai. As for the ones given by others, it was really just a piece of paper with words and drawings on it. How could it be of any more use? A blank piece of paper could still be of some use. What else could a used piece of paper be used for, if not used to start a fire? Qiu Jianhan and the others' understanding of Wu Ying was too superficial. They did not know what Wu Ying had been through or what he had done. So how could they understand Wu Ying's true intentions? Just as the few big shots were racking their brains, hoping to win Wu Ying over, a shocking piece of news came. Something major had happened in the Empire of Zio. The Empire of Zio's royal family had rebelled. The prince had rebelled and dragged the Emperor of Zio down from his throne. The rebel army and the army that came to rescue the emperor fought endlessly. It was difficult to determine the winner, so the entire Empire of Zio was in chaos. The Western Marshal Wang Yunju asked, "Should we seize the opportunity to march westward and annihilate the Empire of Zio?" Naturally, His Majesty had summoned all the big shots for a discussion upon receiving such a shocking piece of news. This was undoubtedly the best opportunity to expand Yutong's territory. It could even be the prelude to Yutong's war of conquest. However, the bigger the movement, the more cautious they had to be, especially now that they had yet to fully understand why such a large-scale rebellion had suddenly broken out in the Empire of Zio. According to Zio's situation in recent years, even if the Emperor of Zio's performance could not be considered remarkable, it was still average. No matter what, it should be able to be maintained for another 1 or 2 generations. The current rebellion had come without a reason. Since there was no reason, they had to think carefully about whether there was something fishy about it. Was it a trap? A trap targeted at Yutong? Wu Ying and the others observed the sky at night. Because of the implied meaning, they quickly came to a conclusion. Zio's national fortune had truly dissipated. Even if Yutong did not send its troops, the current rebellion would be the last straw that would wipe the Empire of Zio off the map of the continent. Everyone was at a loss regarding this matter. The Empire of Zio, which was known as one of the top 5 empires in the world, had actually lost its national fortune? What was going on? No matter what, everyone realized that this was a God-given opportunity. After the Board of War's discussion, Wu Ying quickly came up with a detailed battle plan. His sword was pointed at Zio, and he would annihilate it at full speed. This was a battle to annihilate an empire. Other than the Western troop, which would attack at full force, the Southern troop and the Northern troop would each deploy 100,000 men to support the Western troop from both sides. This was to ensure the advantage of military strength and end the battle quickly. The strategy that Wu Ying had come up with was meticulous and detailed. Every step of the plan, even the daily mission, was clearly planned. A God-given opportunity: annihilate Zio in one battle. The Eastern Line, Fu Baoguo's troops, Break out of the Fortress of Resilience and deploy troops at Dongxuan's border. Prevent Dongxian from acting recklessly. If Dongxian makes a move, we must attack them at all costs. The southern line, the Cold Mountain Tribe, spread the rumor that Supreme Cloud will come to the southern border to participate in the war, intending to shake De Yuan's foundation. The northern line, the steel cavalry of Taizheng's troop, attack from all sides. Fight on your own. Split into 10 teams to harass the enemy in the north and suppress them within our territory. From today onwards, Taizheng will rush to the northern border to guard the north. The nation will begin recruiting soldiers. The time to unify Tianxian is here. Now is the time to build a foundation. Chapter 731. The Empire of Yutong, which had just quieted down for a few days, was suddenly like a spring that had been wound up and a pot of boiling porridge. The entire empire was operating at a high speed, boiling over. A man should serve his country. The heroes are at the front line. Today is the day to build one's career. This is the last chance. Every recruitment point set up across Yutong was filled to the brim with people the moment the recruitment began. This was the aspiration of Yutong's millions of people. To Yutong's people who had had enough of being bullied and had always been passively beaten, the chance to counterattack was like a shot of adrenaline being pumped into everyone. The day of revenge has finally arrived. Under Wu Ying's arrangement, the entire empire of Yutong was filled with a murderous aura. Even the women were filled with righteousness and righteousness. Even the uncles and aunties who were buying groceries on the streets were infused with a sense of valor. The clouds of war were thick, covering the entire territory of Yutong in a very short amount of time. At the same time, Sun Zihu led 50,000 Yutong cavalrymen and charged into the empire of Ziyou like a gigantic steel saber. Wang Yunju led the western frontline's main force of 400,000 men and marched westward. Wherever they went, war banners blotted out the sky. The military was majestic and majestic. The war of annihilation led by Yutong had begun in full swing. Wu Ying oversaw the board of war, allocating the rations, soldiers' pay, weapons, and all resources needed for this war, sending them to the front line in an orderly yet well-organized manner. Yutong had launched this war with all its might. The war of peace had begun. Watching from such a close distance for the first time, Fang Qingtian, Qiu Jinhan, and Leng Daoyin, the 3 military leaders, realized in shock that Wu Ying had actually completed everything on his own. This fellow probably had no family, no wife, no children, and only needed to be responsible to the emperor of Yutong. He could even skip sleep when he was busy. In spite of this, everyone was happy to see it happen. After all, even if the 3 of them worked together, they might not be as efficient and accurate as Wu Ying alone. Although the 3 of them had the reputation of being hoodlums, they were broad-minded people deep down. Even though they had been reduced to 3 senior staff officers drinking tea in the military headquarters, they were still full of joy. The truth before them made them feel reassured and gratified by Wu Ying's abilities. Of course, they were still a little jealous. Residents of Yun, Shangguan Lingxiu arrived in her martial attire. "What is it?" Yin Yang asked. This time, Yutong has mobilized the army to annihilate the empire of Ziyou. The Shangguan family and Ziyou are mortal enemies. How can we not fight? I have come to bid farewell to young master. Yin Yang pursed his lips. Why would you need to participate in such a small battle? Wouldn't that lower your status? Shangguan Lingxiu raised her eyebrows. Just as she was about to retort, someone waved his hand and said, "Summon the 6 young fellows from the Shangguan family." Yin Yang ordered as the 6 children hurried over. "The 6 of you, follow the army and announce to the world that the Shangguan family of generals has descended upon the world once more, to put an end to the grudge with Ziyou." Shangguan Lingxiu was shocked to hear that. How can this be? They were still so young. There will be a time for them to go to the battlefield in the future, but not now. If we skip this battle, there might not be many battles that will require them in the future. Yin Yang was resolute. Put your heart at ease. They have learned a lot now. Although they are young, it doesn't mean that their combat power is weak. Their combat power is no longer below that of ordinary generals. Other than nurturing the children of the family of generals, actual combat is also necessary, especially this battle. If you miss it, there won't be another chance. He turned to look into Shangguan Lingxiu's eyes. In the past, many children of the family of generals had died on the battlefield. It wasn't because of their lack of military training or cultivation base. It was because of their lack of experience in the battlefield. Instead of saying that they lost to the enemy's schemes, it's better to say that they were not prepared at all. In a battle that is almost certain to win like this, they should be tossed in and nurtured continuously. This is the best way to make them mature quickly. These 6 little fellows are still young, but it's not as if there are no benefits to them. If they join the army, the generals will definitely take care of them. And that's already something we don't need to think about. Coupled with their own abilities and equipment, it'll be hard for them to have any accidents. Yin Yang's voice was calm, but his words were heavy. The Shangguan family of generals' road to rise again should begin with this battle. Sister Lingxiu, you should actually think about it carefully. If you were to represent the family of generals again at this time, it would mean that the Shangguan family of generals has already fallen, and there's no more male heirs. Think about it, don't you agree? From now on, you have to try your best not to stand out. Let your children go out and face things and solve them. This is the right thing to do. Shangguan Lingxiu bit her lip and lowered her head. Yin Yang's words might not be easy for ordinary people to understand, but to Shangguan Lingxiu, she could understand it immediately. Not only did these words make sense, they were also the truth. But they're still so young. What if? At this moment, it's already a what if. Isn't it a 1 in a million situation like this? If we still can't give it our all, and we have to wait for an opportunity, even if you were to step out this time, and wait until they grow up and reach Shangguan Wudi's level, there's still a what if. However, I dare say that the situation then won't be as good as it is now. Yin Yang interrupted her. It's reasonable for you to care for them, but your heart. Sigh. Even if they grow up for another 100 years, they'll still be small in front of you and in your heart. Shangguan Lingxiu did not speak. After a long time, she bit her lip hard and said, "All right, we'll listen to you this time." Compared to Shangguan Lingxiu's verbal agreement, but her actual anxiety, the 6 children were eager to go to war this time. Their hearts were filled with excitement that was clearly expressed in their expressions. Yin Yang watched coldly from the sidelines as he watched the excitement on the 6 young faces, his heart unmoved. Once they were on the battlefield and used to seeing death, such excitement and agitation would vanish without a trace. The battlefield had always been the best place for a person to mature quickly. He believed that after this battle, these 6 children would be reborn, as if they were Buddhas, metamorphosing and improving themselves. However, there was no other way. They were the children of the family of generals. Their future would always be a struggle between life and death. This was their destiny. It could not be changed. And end. Chapter 732. Shangguan Lingxiu could support them for a while, but she could not support them forever. Similarly, Yin Yang could not change their destinies either. The only thing he could do was to bring their destinies forward as much as he could, to make them safer and more stable, to increase their starting point from what was already a very high point. In addition, he had to provide the children with a background that no one would dare to provoke. Up until now, who in the continent dared to provoke Supreme Cloud in this world? That would be seeking death. Do not be impatient. Did they not see that Han Sanhe was killed? Bauer was reluctant to part with his companions, his eyes brimming with tears. There's no need to be envious or sad. When the war to conquer Dongxian comes, no matter how young you are, I'll definitely let you go to the battlefield and fight alongside your companions. Yin Yang's promise brightened Bauer's eyes. Thank you, Uncle Yin. You don't have to thank me. I'm very afraid of your parents now. Other than scolding me, they'll beat me up too. I'm still shaken. Yin Yang answered in a low voice. If Supreme Earth and Supreme Water were still here, they would definitely beat Yin Yang up for making this promise. Whether they thought that it was reasonable or right, Yin Yang, who had made this decision, had to be beaten up. However, Yin Yang would not change his decision. There was no turning back. As an emperor who would pacify the world and lead the world, he had to enter the battlefield and participate in decisive battles. Only by experiencing the brutality of the battlefield and the sharpness of the bloodshed could one understand the value of a soldier's sacrifice, understand the hardships of a soldier and the hardships of the front line. If not for this, how could he protect the country? Dynasties and empires had fallen after a few generations. A large part of the reason was that the emperors had grown up in the palace since young. They did not know or understand anything. What they had seen and heard was nothing more than the teachings of the Grand Tutor and civil officials, the records and books and documents, and the words and atmosphere of the palace maids and eunuchs around them. Living in such a living environment, it was inevitable that one would subconsciously place more importance on the civil side than the military. They would also be intimidated by the murderous aura of the generals. No matter how much the generals tried to conceal their murderous aura, it was still a great deterrent to those who had never been on the battlefield. Sometimes the so-called high achievements might not really mean that their achievements were too high. It was just that they caused too much of a deterrence to their superiors. Any superiors who felt this kind of pressure from their subordinates again and again would feel extremely uncomfortable and uncontrollable. They would subconsciously reject them. When a country began to value culture over military force, it was a sign that it had begun to go downhill. Correspondingly, the day of destruction would not be too far away. Since the beginning of time, no one had ever been inferior. Shangguan Lingxiu was stopped by Yun Yang, but the 8,000 steel guards of the Shangguan family, who originally belonged to Shangguan Lingxiu, continued to escort the 6 young masters, according to the original plan. This decision made Wang Yunju, the Western Army's commander-in-chief, flip the table, smash the teacup, and seethe in anger. Mother Ker, do you think this is a nursery? This was a battlefield. It was a battlefield. Do you know that this is a King battlefield? What do you want your father to do by sending 6 of these little things over? Are the brains of the Board of War's people stuffed with sh*t? He had his aides submit a petition on the spot, requesting for the 6 children to be sent back. In spite of this, Wu Ying, who was in charge of the Board of War, knew at once that it was Yun Yang's decision for the 6 children to participate in the war. How could he reject Lord Supreme Cloud's intention? He ordered Wang Yunju directly, 2 choices. First, look after the children and win the war. Second, you come back and let Qiu Jianhan lead the troops in your place. Faced with this choice, Wang Yunju wilted immediately. From the bottom of his heart, he had really hoped that his teacher, Qiu Jianhan, could come to the Western front line and watch the war of annihilation that he was presiding over. Not as a substitute. If he were to be sent back because of the 6 children now, his teacher, Qiu Jianhan, had just forgiven him, and he was in the limelight of Yutong's first war in this world. He was at the height of his success and was in high spirits. If he were to go back because of the 6 children and have his teacher replace him, Wang Yunju could totally imagine what kind of ending he would receive. It would be a light punishment to be expelled from the school immediately. I choose the first one. I'll definitely look after the children and win the war. Wang Yunju corrected himself immediately. Actually, I've long wanted to groom a few rising talents. I like these 6 children of the Shangguan family the moment I see them. I'm just afraid that my lack of talent and knowledge will hinder the children's development. The military subordinates were dumbfounded, their eyes filled with disbelief as they watched their marshal write his reply in a fawning manner. Qiu Jianhan, who was in the capital city, slammed the table and cursed when he heard the news. Little brat, this old man wants to *ck all 8 generations of your ancestors. How dare you reject such a God-given opportunity? I know that you're lacking in talent and knowledge, but don't you know to let your father go? Yun Yang had been quiet during this period of time. Other than training the mystical beasts, torturing the 4 noble young masters, and chatting with Shangguan Lingxiu about military affairs, he had sparred with Ji Lingxi. The last point, however, made him feel the fear of being dominated by despair. Not only had Amy recovered to its original state during this period of time, it had also advanced a lot. The spiritual qi that it could provide now was at a terrifying level in Yun Yang's eyes. Ever since Yun Yang had consumed the treasured resources that Yun Zuyu had given him, his body had been in a steady and continuous state of exuding energy. There was no leakage at all as it turned into mystical qi and assimilated into Yun Yang's body. Furthermore, the endless divine art that Yun Yang cultivated was also a superb cultivation method that was unparalleled in the continent. According to Yun Yang's understanding, this cultivation method could surpass any cultivation method in this world in terms of improvement speed, and it could absorb spiritual qi at least twice as fast. It could be said that the efficiency of Yin Yang's cultivation for a day was at least comparable to a month's worth of ordinary cultivation geniuses. 10 days of focused cultivation was equivalent to a year's worth of hard work for others. Such a speed of improvement was unprecedented throughout the history of Tianxian. It was unparalleled in the world. Ji Lingxi's cultivation method, on the other hand, was at the pinnacle of the continent, perhaps even more efficient than the cultivation methods known in this world, but it was still much slower than the endless divine art. A conservative estimate would say that the difference was at least double that of the endless divine art. In spite of this, Ji Lingxi's improvement in ability still managed to overpower Yun Yang. What was even more outrageous was that the gap was growing wider by the day. It was only a difference of 3 minor levels today, but it might be a difference of 4 levels tomorrow. Yun Yang cultivated with all his might, refusing to believe it. He requested for Emi to transfer energy to him endlessly, causing Emi to groan and complain. It was not easy for him to advance to the 7th heaven of Dao realm during this period of time. Even if such a speed of improvement was not unparalleled, it was still something to be proud of. Chapter 733. Ji Lingxi's improvement in cultivation base was completely unreasonable. A few days ago, she was only slightly beyond the Dao realm, but now, she had completely stabilized her cultivation base. During her sparring session with Yin Yang, her aura had unexpectedly experienced an explosive growth. Yin Yang was very familiar with this sudden aura, because it was an aura that would only erupt when one's cultivation base had a breakthrough and was not under control. Another breakthrough. This meant that Ji Lingxi had taken another step forward on the unknown path of an advanced cultivation base. The gap between the two of them was visible to the naked eye. Faced with the reality of an even greater gap, Yin Yang was dumbfounded and speechless. What was going on? This was an unbelievable and incomprehensible form of cheating. What cultivation method are you cultivating? Is it convenient for you to reveal it? Yin Yang asked with a frown. Yes, Phoenix, no. Ji Lingxi was halfway through her answer when a hint of confusion appeared on her face. I don't think I am now. The cultivation method I'm cultivating now seems to be called the 9 Heavens Mantra. I don't know what's going on either. Yin Yang pursed his lips. Changing one's basic cultivation method is a huge taboo in cultivation. Forget it, that's not important. But you don't even know your own cultivation method. What's going on? I've never cultivated this cultivation method before. It really only appeared recently, like it appeared out of thin air. But it feels like I've been cultivating it for a long time. It's as if I've been cultivating it for a long time. There are no obstacles at all. Everything is so smooth, like it's made by God. Ji Lingxi replied in a daze. Yin Yang was speechless for a good while. This matter, why did it sound so mysterious? Now that I think about it, there must be a huge problem with my birth. Ji Lingxi sighed. I don't know what kind of existence my seemingly unreliable father is. This cultivation method of mine should be something imprinted in my memory, but I really don't have the slightest bit of knowledge about these things. Yin Yang nodded and said, It doesn't matter. It's fine as long as there's no harm. He sighed inwardly. How could he even explain it? Ji Lingxi did not even know the cultivation method she was cultivating, but she was advancing at such a rapid pace. He knew everything clearly, but he couldn't catch up no matter how hard he tried. Ji Lingxi gritted her teeth and said, Throughout the ages, I've never seen a father who cheated a girl like this. When I find him, I will pull out all his hair and beard. I'm so angry. The more he spoke, the angrier he became. He stamped his feet and said, I'm so angry, I'm so angry. That old bastard, I really want to stab him now. Yun-Yang coughed, exasperated. A sudden impulse rose within him, and he could not help saying, "When you plan to beat him up, count me in." During this period of time, he was tormented by the red light to the point where he wished he was dead. It was impossible for Yun-Yang to say that he did not have any complaints after going through so many life and death situations. Coupled with the resentment of using cheats instead of risking his life, he really wanted to beat that old bastard up. "What kind of father are you?" Jilingxi nodded in agreement. "Let's beat him up together when we find him." Yun-Yang scratched his head and said, "If you beat him up, he probably won't dare to retaliate. That's family happiness, but I'm his son-in-law. It's not right to do this, it's treacherous." Jilingxi was stunned when she heard him. Her face and ears reddened as she said, "Shameless. Whose son-in-law are you?" "Humph." She lifted her head and turned to leave. Yun-Yang coughed. "I'm going to the front line to take a look. Are you coming?" Jilingxi turned around at once, her eyes gleaming. "When?" "When the 10 Yama Kings return, I'll depart." "Are you coming?" Yun-Yang answered. "I'll go with you." Jilingxi decided immediately. After a pause, she said, "Sister Lingxiu, let's ask her to come as well." During this period of time, Jilingxi and Shengguan Lingxiu's relationship had improved by leaps and bounds. There was no doubt that Shengguan Lingxiu was a very, very good girl. Whether it was her personality or the way she conducted herself, she was magnanimous, gentle, kind, considerate of the bigger picture, and loyal. The strength in her bones, in particular, was evident and commendable. To any man who knew her well, this kind of woman was a priceless treasure that was worth cherishing. Even Jilingxi, who was also a woman and a rival in love, was full of admiration for Shengguan Lingxiu. Jilingxi's psychological journey toward Shengguan Lingxiu was full of twists and turns. From admiration at the beginning, to getting close to her, to being extremely close to her, to realizing that she had fallen in love with the same man, with such an outstanding person. However, she could not bring herself to hate or resent her. She kept a small distance, but it did not take long for her to get closer again. Gradually, she began to tolerate her, and as they got to know each other better, she grew to admire and like her even more. Finally, she realized that living together was not something unacceptable. In the end, Jilingxi had gained a bestie who was almost as good as Yurulan. Jilingxi was a woman as well. She had the heart of a girl who wanted to monopolize her lover and would not allow anyone else to share. But she was helpless when the time came. She did not know when the red glow on her would disappear or become ineffective. What was the point of forcefully occupying Yun-Yang and not letting any other woman get close to her? What good could come of it? The relationship between people needed to be tempered and cultivated. If she persisted for a long time, the final result would only be to force Yun-Yang to drift further away from her, or even leave her forever. If it really came to that, she would not even be able to maintain her basic identity and status. That would be asking for trouble. Instead of going to such extremes, it was better for her to take a step back first and let Yun-Yang be touched by her sacrifice. This was not playing petty tricks, but the wisdom of one's way of interacting with others. Perhaps it could be said to be a little cunning of a girl. If she wanted to have him for a long time, why not take a step back first? As long as she did not lose the momentum, the advantages would outweigh the disadvantages. Shengguan Lingxiu had undoubtedly fulfilled all the basic conditions for Jilingxi to take a step back. It could even be said that Shengguan Lingxiu's existence had, to a certain extent, helped her avert the most awkward situation. With Shengguan Lingxiu at the forefront, she was protecting both of their interests. Therefore, this could be considered a good thing. Every time she thought about it, she could not help but feel embarrassed, angry, and helpless at the same time. Her anger towards her father, whom she had never met, grew to a whole new level. Other fathers love their daughters meticulously. What you're doing? Although it's also meticulous, it's too meticulous. I understand that you're doing this to protect your daughter. There's no doubt that you're doing this with good intentions. There's nothing wrong with that, but there must be a limit to everything, no? Once things are handled too excessively, it'll be too extreme. Although I won't go as far as to give myself up before we get married. Will I be severely injured with just a touch? Will I die with just a touch? Will any man in this world be able to endure such a thing? Which hero can endure a woman like this for a long time? It was only because Yun Yang's skin was thick, and his recovery ability was astonishing. If it were someone else, he might have died 100 times over. Chapter 734. It was not an exaggeration at all. Had it not been for Yun Yang, it would have been a conservative estimate of 1,000 to 800 rounds, let alone 180 rounds. This world had always been a place where men were superior to women. It was common for men to have multiple wives and concubines. Now, Yun Yang had placed a restriction on his daughter that would kill anyone who touched it. Did he want his daughter to be a bachelor for the rest of her life? At least, based on the current situation, it could not be removed within a short period of time. Did she really have to watch the man she liked become someone else's husband? How many years would she have to wait for the red light to disappear before she could take him back? By then, this man would probably already have many wives and concubines by his side. Would she, the first wife, have to be the third, fourth, fifth, and sixth wife? Perhaps by then, this man would already be dead. Are you trying to get me killed? I really don't know what that old thing is thinking, Ji Lingxi thought hatefully, her teeth grinding loudly. Luckily, I still have Shengguan Lingxiu on my side. It's also because of family issues that I don't dare to step out of the relationship between a man and a woman. It's really temporary for him, and it's going to be resolved soon. As for me, it's going to be for the rest of my life. What an old bastard. Sigh. Yun Yang waited for a day, but the 10 kings had yet to return. Amidst his thoughts, he heaved a rare sigh. It's time for the 9 supremes to unite, Yun Yang said quietly. It looks like all of you won't be coming back. As Supreme Cloud, I won't ignore the war, but the 9 supremes can't be involved in everything either. When I'm done with the matters here in the capital, I'll go to the front line to take a look. Don't worry, everything will be carried out according to plan. I am Supreme Cloud, Yutong's Supreme Cloud forever. Actually, I've never wanted to take this step, but I can't do it now. Yin Yang walked out of his room in a purple robe. Ji Lingxi was cultivating under the flowering tree in the yard. She had long felt that cultivating in Yun Yang's small yard was much more efficient than anywhere else. In the yard, especially under the flowering tree, the effect was more than twice that of other places. Although Ji Lingxi did not understand why, she still subconsciously chose this place to cultivate whenever she wanted to. For a martial artist, nothing was more important than improving their strength. Just as he was cultivating, he saw Yun Yang walk out of his room with a solemn expression. His aura exuded an indescribable sense of sorrow and oppression. He couldn't help asking, "Where are you going?" For some reason, Ji Lingxi felt an inexplicable ripple in her heart. She could vaguely feel that the place Yun Yang was about to go to was closely related to her. The feeling was inexplicable, but it was strangely real. With this thought in mind, he blurted out without hesitation, "Can I go with you?" Yun Yang thought about it and shook his head decisively. No. She did not expect Yun Yang to reject her. She murmured in disappointment, "Why?" Yun Yang said faintly, "There are some places that only I can enter." Ji Lingxi snorted and turned back to her room in a huff. When Yun Yang went out, he followed him quietly. "I don't believe that you'll be able to leave me behind with my current level of cultivation and power." However, after Yun Yang left the house, he really disappeared after turning a corner. When Ji Lingxi chased after him, there was no trace of him left. Ji Lingxi stomped her feet in frustration. "Damn it! I forgot that this bastard has the art of transformation." She lifted her head to look at the clouds in the sky, her expression conflicted. Which one is it? Is it the one that looks like a rabbit? Or is it the one that looks like a bear? Sigh. Some things really couldn't be done as one wished with a high cultivation base. Unless one's cultivation base was high enough, so high that no one or thing could be beyond one's control. Otherwise, just like these clouds. What the hell are these things? The residents of 9 Supremes. The 9 Supremes, which had not been seen for a long time, stood in silence as usual. Yin Yang transformed into a cloud and hovered in midair. observing the formation that was shrouded in clouds and mist for a long time. At this moment, the clouds that flashed through his eyes were like the clouds that he himself had transformed into, passing by leisurely. This time, he stayed outside the residence of 9 Supremes for a long time before he leaped down. As the saying went, one's emotions were frail when one was close to one's home. Yin Yang's current mood was similar. Ever since he knew that his brothers might still be alive, the sorrow that had accumulated in his heart had lessened considerably. However, as long as he came here, he would always feel an inexplicable sense of worry. After all, it was only a possibility that they were still alive. How realistic was this possibility? What if he had guessed wrongly? Various thoughts arose one after another, his heart in turmoil. It was difficult for him to feel at ease for a moment. However, no matter how troubled he was, he still had to face reality. In the residence of 9 Supremes, in front of his third brother Supreme Wood's room, Yun Yang stood for a while, and as he cultivated the first stage of sacred wood charm, he placed his hand on the door. A moment later, the door quietly opened. Just like the previous doors, a fresh and clean aura immediately greeted him. Yun Yang was slightly taken aback. Lifting his head to look, he saw that the room was filled with lush potted plants. There were 4 shelves in each of the 4 directions, and on each shelf were 3 potted plants. The plants were green and rich, and all of them were exuding a strong aura of life. It made one feel relaxed and happy, and it was fascinating to look at. It should be noted that no one had entered the room for almost 3 years. Naturally, no one had taken care of them, watered them, or cultivated them. However, the 12 potted plants that Yin Yang could see were brimming with vitality, showing no signs of decay at all. It was incredible. In spite of this, Yun Yang ignored it after a quick glance and shifted his gaze to the table. Other than the potted plants, there was only a table and a chair in the room. On top of the table was a letter. It was Supreme Wood's will. Yun Yang could still vividly recall his third brother Supreme Wood's warm gaze. As if he would never lose his temper. He would always do things slowly, unhurriedly, but methodically, with a sense of tension and relaxation. His personality was, in fact, the more prominent one among the brothers. They had been together for so many years, but Yun Yang had never seen his third brother lose his temper. He had always taken good care of each of his brothers. Each time Yun Yang was by his third brother's side, even if he did not speak or make a sound, he would feel a sense of warmth, as if he was bathed in the spring breeze. Chapter 735. There was no doubt that this was Supreme Wood's will. However, Yun Yang had only read the beginning of Supreme Wood's will, and he could already feel that its content was different from the others. Ninth brother, you're here. If I'm not wrong, then when you see this letter, it should be 3 years after our accident. I also know that the person who comes will definitely be you. Isn't it strange? Yun Yang perked up when he read the letter. His hands that had always been steady began to tremble. 3 years after our incident? What did this mean? Could it be that Supreme Wood's third brother had already known that there would be an accident, and had even predicted the time? I wanted to write a will like them. But I think that you must be on the verge of breaking down from the torment that you've endured all the way until now. I'm the only one who might know some inside information. I can't bear to let you suffer alone. So I'm leaving you a little bit of information here. When you read this letter, when you read this, you should be enlightened. I'll take it that you'll understand half of it. Don't ask me why it's half, because I actually don't know the other half. Thank you, OL 9th. When Yun Yang read up to this point, his heart that had been hanging in the air could finally be at ease. He almost cried tears of joy and sang a song. For a moment, he felt a lump in his throat. The boiling emotions that had been stored in his heart could not be contained. Yun Yang really wanted to sing, to dance, to scream, to yell, to jump, to vent the excitement in his heart. His brothers were not dead after all. Lied to me? What does it matter if they lied to me? Torture? What does it matter if I'm tortured? None of this matters. It didn't matter what he did. As long as they could live, as long as they were still alive. That was the best thing that could happen. The so-called joy in this world was nothing more than this. Yin Yang clutched the letter to his chest and breathed deeply, exhaling slowly. His face was beaming with joy and delight. It was only after a while that he managed to suppress his excitement and continued reading. The formation of the 9 Supremes is the will of the Creator. It's a predestined number. Only the candidates for the 9 Supremes are chosen by someone else. There are coincidences, necessity, and also cue cutters. I'm a cue cutter. Yin Yang frowned as he read the words, incomprehensible thoughts swirling in his heart. The word cue jumper was easy to understand, but the first line, the formation of the 9 Supremes, was the will of the Creator. Since it was the work of the Creator, whether it was intentional or not, it should be an unshakable destiny. Then, how could there be the so-called cutting the cue? Who could cut the cue? Actually, I don't really remember much, only some fragments. It's probably because my physique is special and different from others. I knew that after this incident, I would have to go back to where I came from. But I don't know where I came from. And I don't know what's going on with the others. What's the situation? Yin Yang bit his lips tightly, the doubts in his heart growing. The memory fragments buried deep in my heart tell me that my surname is Tan. This surname is strange and rare, isn't it? I think it's strange too, but what's stranger is my name. It's actually called Tani. It's said that when my father gave me my name, a group of brothers gathered together to come up with the idea of calling me Tani. It meant that anyone who had something they were hesitating about could come and talk to me. Don't ask me why I suddenly brought up this topic, because this is the clearest memory fragment buried deep in my heart. Other than that, I don't even know who my father is. Looking at the ellipsis in the letter, Yin Yang almost laughed out loud. He could totally imagine his third brother's speechless resentment towards his own name. Tani. This name, it was truly a strange one. Come and talk to me if there's anything you're hesitating about. What a great idea. The person who came up with the idea was talented, but the person who decided on the name was even more talented. I'm cultivating a wood-based cultivation method, a completely supportive one. This suits my personality very well. I've always liked to help others. When I was choosing back then, I naturally chose the wood-based cultivation method. But this seems to be different from my father's original intention. I remember being beaten up many times, but eldest uncle was very appreciative of it. He protected me every time. Alright, the recollection of my memory fragments ends here. There doesn't seem to be anything more. These few years are the happiest days of my life, having so many brothers working hard together. It's a pity that it's all so short. Now that I have to leave, I'm filled with reluctance. Right, I always feel a sense of familiarity when I meet OL 5th and OL 8th. But I've never seen their shadow in my memory. This situation is very strange. However, this should be a good thing. I think OL 5th and OL 8th might be cue cutters as well. OL 9th. If something happens to all of us one day, OL 5th and OL 8th should be the 3 people you don't have to worry about the least. Reading up to this point, Yin Yang's heart clenched once more. What did he mean by only OL 3rd? OL 5th and OL 8th. What about the others? Could the others still be in danger? Thinking of this, Yin Yang quickly recalled the past. 5th and 8th sisters-in-law Yin Zuyu and Yu Rulan's inexplicable disappearance and third brother's unique letter proved that they had not met with death. But it also proved something else. For example, 7th brother, old Duga's only son, he would definitely not be a cue cutter. Eldest brother and 4th sister, they too. I can't be sure about the whereabouts of the other brothers, but eldest brother is definitely not. The eldest brother in my memory isn't this current eldest brother. The 9 Supremes are unique existences that don't exist in heaven and earth. Therefore, out of the so-called 9 Supremes, only one will be left in the end. This is also fate. Supreme Wood's message was messy, as if he was trying hard to recall, trying to give Yin Yang more hints, but he could not recall anything no matter how hard he tried. Therefore, life and death is inevitable. Don't be blindly optimistic about the separation of life and death. Reading this, Yin Yang suddenly felt a sharp pain in his heart. It was unavoidable. Did this mean that someone among the brothers would definitely die? However, everyone's fate has always been inextricably linked to yours. Supreme Wood's message continued. One day in the future, if you can reach the level of dominating the universe, you can use your divine power to reverse time and revive the dead. Anything is possible for those who have reached that level. There's nothing that can't be done if you put your heart into it. Let's cut to the chase. My cultivation method, the so-called sacred wood charm, can't even be considered a trivial art. I don't mind giving it up and cultivate the art of vitality that I've always been cultivating. Remember to cultivate well. OL Second's golden charm is below. You can use it to open OL Second's room. Speaking of which, OL Second is also a ruthless character that I haven't seen through. The main reason is that I don't think the golden charm is of much use either. This can be considered as a reason. Alright, let's cut to the chase. We brothers will definitely meet one day. When that time comes, let's not stop until we're drunk. Supreme Wood's message came to an end. Yin Yang was dumbstruck. Chapter 736. There were too many things revealed in this. And there were too many things that could not be understood. The wills left behind by the other brothers were all genuine wills. Third brother Supreme Wood's will, on the other hand, was more like an instruction manual. It meant that he had an extraordinary background. It meant that the 9 Supremes were extraordinary. It meant that a few of his brothers were extraordinary. However, there were even more unexplainable things. The Creator's arrangement. Someone intervened in the selection of the 9 Supremes. Cue cutting. So many people with extraordinary backgrounds intervened in the 9 Supremes' descent. What kind of people were they? The final conclusion was that 3rd brother, 5th brother, and 8th brother must be fine. The eldest in his memory was not Supreme Earth. It was someone else. There must be a separation of life and death among the rest of the brothers. There was nothing more about their identities. His memory was blurry. He could not recall it. The residence of 9 Supreme Sacred Wood Charm, which was originally a wood-based arcane art, was but a useless skill that he did not hesitate to discard. My cultivation method, the art of vitality, is the real deal. Father. Eldest uncle. Oh, the second brother mentioned at the end of the text seemed to have a different background. Yin Yang did not know what it meant, and why it was specifically mentioned. It was intriguing. There was also the far-reaching ambition. Fate was related to you. When you became the ruler of the universe, you could cross the boundaries of time and space and resurrect anyone you wanted. These were the gist of what Supreme Wood had left behind in his book. In spite of this, these things were too abstruse, unimaginable, and beyond his knowledge. It made Yin Yang's usually clear mind feel like it was a ball of paste, or rather, a pot of boiled porridge. Everything in Supreme Wood's letter was like a fog in the clouds. All the words, really all the words, were only half written. Not a single sentence was completed. After sorting through Supreme Wood's words, the most direct impression Yin Yang had was that his 3rd brother's father was a weirdo. A weirdo who could stand shoulder to shoulder with a certain violent female father. He had actually named his own son as Talk. Why didn't you play a little? As for the rest, it was a complete mess and was unclear. His previously relaxed and even joyful mood was once again raised, suspended, and hung high up in the air. He had thought that his brothers had not perished and had been rescued, but it seemed that the chances were not optimistic. Right now, the only ones who could confirm that they were fine were Old 3rd, Old 5th, and Old 8th. At most, there would be the addition of 2nd brother, who might have some other background. As for the rest, it was all up to the heavens. Even so, I'm relieved of 2 things. Yin Yang chuckled bitterly. At the very least, it looks like 5th sister-in-law Yin Zuyu and 8th sister-in-law Yu Rulan have been taken away by 5th and 8th brother. They're really fine now. This also explains why Sister Yu gave me so many treasures, and why Sister Lan's letter was so strange. For a moment, Yin Yang could not tell if he was sad or happy. He only felt that his heart was a mess, so complicated that he was at a loss, unable to think. Yin Yang stayed in the small room for a long time before he finally whispered, "3rd brother, thank you." These words came from the bottom of his heart. Although he had gained a lot from this trip, and was pleasantly surprised, he was also disappointed. If it were not for Supreme Wood's half-baked explanation, Yun-Yang might not know how long it would take for him to figure it out on his own, based on the content that he had just read. This was not related to his intelligence, but the reasons were too unconventional. Each incident was as inconceivable as the mysterious red glow on Ji Lingxi's body. Beyond his knowledge, he sighed softly and picked up Supreme Wood's letter rather reluctantly. Fiddling with it, he flipped the letter around and glanced at it. His eyes widened at once. On the back of the letter, there was a paragraph of words. I, your third brother, love exotic flowers and plants the most in my life. These 12 pots of plants in the room are all good stuff that I've scoured through half of the profound sky continent to collect. They are all rare exotic plants, and at the same time, they are also treasures that are hard to come by. Consider them as a little gift from your third brother to you. So don't let me eat these 12 bonsai plants directly. If I do, it would be a reckless waste of resources. Use my art of vitality and sacred wood spell to infuse it into the plants. Within 10 days, each of the 12 plants can bear 3 fruits. Take note that each plant can only bear 3 fruits at most. If it bears more, it must be plucked at once. If there are more than 3, the medicinal effect will be weakened, and it won't be good. Gather one of each of the 12 types of fruits, and consume them together. It can increase the user's mystical energy by 120 years. Cough, ninth brother, you must take good care of these 12 bonsai for me. These are the 12 constellation fruit bonsai that I've collected for a long time. Yun-Yang did not know whether to laugh or cry at the other part of Supreme Wood's third brother's letter. Why had he not realized that his third brother was so adorable in the past? It looked like he really liked these 12 bonsai very much. Between the lines, there was a hint that he was afraid that Yun-Yang would take them for himself. It was conceivable that Supreme Wood had not planned to keep these 12 bonsai, but thinking that he might not be able to bring them away, or for some other reason, he had left them behind. Despite knowing that he wanted to keep them, he had still instructed them earnestly, afraid that Yun-Yang would mistreat his precious baby. How adorable was this? You only want the plants themselves anyway. It's too easy. I only want the fruits. I only want the fruits. Yun-Yang communicated with Emmy immediately. Emmy, do you see these 12 bonsai? Emmy, whose eyes were already filled with green light, could not help but feel itchy. Aya, is this a super good item? A dream item? Yun-Yang was stunned. The benefits of the plants mentioned in Supreme Wood's letter were that all 12 types of fruits had to be gathered to increase 120 years of mystical energy. Such an increase was, of course, a rare treasure to ordinary people, but to Yun-Yang, it was merely the icing on the cake. After all, Yun-Yang still had a boundless foundation hidden within him. It was hardly of much help, not to mention that there were so many varieties. Cultivating them was time-consuming and laborious, so the benefits would be limited in a short period of time. Aya, Aya. Emmy's soft voice was unusually excited, expressing its high opinion of the 12 pots of plants. It liked them very much, and even seemed to be drooling. Chapter 737. For the past few days, the back of my head had been hurting. The pain came in waves. Every few minutes it would hurt. A few days ago the pain wasn't that bad, so I didn't care about it. This morning the pain suddenly intensified. It would hurt every 4 to 5 seconds. The first time, it would hurt so much that I grimaced in pain. 2 seconds later, it would be fine again. After a few seconds it would hurt again. It was so painful that I broke out in cold sweat. It was really excruciating. I was scared. I thought I had a serious illness. I went to the hospital with a hot towel covering my head. I looked for the doctor. After the doctor asked about it, he said one sentence with certainty. You're freezing. At that time, I was dumbfounded. It's summer. I'm sweating all over. I'm freezing? The doctor was very experienced. You turned on the air conditioner, right? I said, I swear, it was too hot the day before yesterday. I couldn't stand it. And it was only turned on for an hour. The doctor asked me, you haven't turned on the air conditioner for the past few years, right? This was the truth. It had been almost 10 years, and the heat was just like that. Other than sometimes turning on the air conditioner in winter, The air conditioner had never been turned on in summer. You're freezing from the air conditioner. The back of your head hurts so much. It's either a serious illness or a vasospasm. However, you have to be careful. If this vasospasm isn't treated properly, it might happen once every summer. In the end, it will develop into a deep-rooted migraine. Scared the hell out of me. So the main point was take a day off today. Cough. Purple. You're tuning in to the Lee May's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.